All right, we're going to call to order the August 6th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council Redevelopment Successor Agency and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight's going to be led by Ms. Christine Amy. The council did not meet in closed session this evening, so we're going to proceed directly to our regular session agenda, item 1A being first. Item 1A is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, the council is not allowed under state law to take action or even have a real discussion about issues that are brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We do ask that anyone that wishes to address the council under item 1A or any other item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available near the front door and turn it into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard. And so to that end, we ask that all the comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and that flip chart simply indicates which agenda item we're currently considering. The clerk accepts the yellow cards all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report on any particular agenda item. So, for example, if you're here for item 97, thank God we don't have one, as soon as the staff is done with their presentation, we don't take any additional cards. So once the public discussion or the council questions have begun, there's no more cards taken. So if you are here to speak on a specific item, then try to get your card in as soon as you can, but certainly before the staff presentation is complete. We also recognize that for a lot of folks, this might be their first meeting, or they're just uncomfortable speaking in public, so we try to be a little bit supportive in the community, and so we ask that there not be any boos or catcalls, or actually even any applause or other demonstrations, so we can maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, we have a couple of requests to speak under item 1A, and the first is by Mr. Bill Lowell. Not yet.
Testing?
There
Yes.
you go.
Okay. Yes, William Lowell, West Sacramento for the record, and I think I left a copy of my letter to this Daimler Buses of North America that was providing some of the buses for Yolo Bus and Regional Transit. And so as a result of their recommendation back in January, why Yolo Bus is modifying the flip seats so that they don't sit down for people like myself that uses a shopping cart or a walker, and it's strictly for wheelchairs and scooters, and this cuts down on the space people have for a shopping cart. And as I see it, without actually coming out and saying so, it discourages people from shopping in West Sacramento unless you have your own car or other arrangements to get to and from wherever you're shopping. I think we should reconsider, instead of just leaving it like it is now. Let's flip those front seats around and make the seating area at least one on each side, like they do on the older light rail cars, where the front seats face the rear seats, and there's a shared seating area, and you can get even a big shopping cart in between and still have two people sitting on each side. And so I think we should think in terms of accommodating more people rather than fewer people, since more people are living longer, but many with disabilities. But let's allow them to continue to be independent, if you will. And also, I was wondering why my air conditioner was cutting off after it got to about 83 or something like that. And here I was getting calls from PG&E on my cell phone and on my landline telling me to conserve energy. Well, I thought my air conditioner was going out on me. So I wound up paying $80 to McDonald Heating and Air Conditioning. They came out and they said there was a device already put on there by PG&E, so they already controlled my air conditioner. So why do they bother calling me twice a day on these 100-degree days when they're in control? And so anyway, I wasted $80 on that, and I'm trying to get them to quit calling me to remind me of something they already have control over. So other than that, why, everything's pretty normal, but I think we should seriously consider other changes so as to allow more people to continue riding the buses. And I might mention, Mike Wiley, the manager of Regional Transit, called me back when I shared this letter with him, and he said they weren't buying that argument. He didn't say exactly what they were doing with the existing buses. Maybe they're just requiring people to use the seat belt if they're sitting in those front seats. But he said those new buses they will be getting in October will be furnished with a new device that protects that person from falling forward in case of a quick stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Rob White?
Good evening, all West Sacramentonians. I'm Rob White. I'm resident of Sacramento, West Sacramento since 2008, resident and homeowner. I have an extensive background in national, state, and as well as community service. I'm irresistibly attracted to helping others. That's just my nature.
Rob, could I just, for the folks watching on TV at home, if you could either step a little closer to the microphone. There's a button at your right hand to bring the mic closer up to you so you can be heard.
Oh, yeah, it needs to come up a little bit. I hope that's not taking my time out. Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. Yes, as I said, I'm irresistibly attracted to helping others. That's just my way and my nature in helping people, and that's the way I've lived my life. But thusly, when I see my fellow residents suffering economically and socially under some of the missteps of this administration, I'm deeply concerned, and I'm compelled from apathy into action and from silence into speaking today. Over the past 2 years, through research and personal experience, I have discovered issues and practices that fly in the face of American values in West Sacramento, and there's not enough time to address those all here today at this particular point in time, but I will be returning with further reports to the West Sacramentonians. Okay, I'm just going to focus on law enforcement right now. We all know the name Sergio Alvarez, the West Sac PD rapist. I'm going to speak on this issue because I'm a law enforcement official myself, and I retired honorably from the not from West Sac Police Department, thank goodness, but from the State Peace Officer Services. But we all know that the police chief said that Mr. Alvarez was simply a bad apple. And we know that if there's a bad apple in a barrel, that there's going to be more contamination than just from that bad apple, especially if it's gotten as rotten as Mr. Sergio Alvarez has gotten. If we only dig a little bit, we will find that there are many more rotten apples and possibly even more rotten apples. This is not to take away from the many and majority of the really good officers that are really serving the public and trying to do their job in a faithful manner and in accordance with the Constitution. 70 officers in the barrel, 70 apples in the barrel. They're all closely associated. I'm just wondering, what did Sergio Alvarez see in the West Sac Police Department that encouraged him to think that he would have impunity for his crimes? What cultural dynamic did he experience to make him so comfortable to commit those deeds for almost 2 years? Mrs. Alvarez gave us a little bit of insight into that at his sentencing hearing. She stated and basically told the court that she blames the leadership of West Sacramento Police Department for giving him a blind pass on the abuse that he had committed. I will just wrap it up real quick. I did run over time, I understand. But Mayor, I'll just say you have had a very long watch and you've set the culture for the services in this city. Do you bear any responsibility for what has been going on in our city and abuses to our citizens? Well, I hope that you will in the future, and if you do not, you will be held to account by the people.
All right, thank you, Mr. White.
No, I have one more thing. The police chief, Mr. Martin Tuttle, Ms. Carol Richardson, D.A. Reisling, it's the assembly
Mr. White, your time has expired.
I'm going to continue, is Mr. Roger Dickinson and the Yolo County Grand Jury. They need to listen.
All right, we're going to take a brief...
That Mr. Calderon is not Marcos, and this is not the Philippines. This is America. Thank you for your time.
All right. So let me Again, the rules apply to everyone equally. We've had speakers from throughout our community participate in our sessions for 28 years, and everyone is expected to follow the same rules so that everyone has a chance to be heard, so that we don't have meetings that go till midnight. And we encourage folks to provide their testimony, but there's no special treatment in these meetings. And so we won't have this happen again. We'll either clear the room or call a recess of the council, but we can't operate in a way that the citizens of the community can't be heard because someone is monopolizing the time. All right, Cynthia Islas, welcome.
I want to approach and give you guys some pictures.
Don't worry about it. If you speak right into it, we can hear you a little better. You can
I'm used to public speaking, thanks. Anyway, I live over in what used to be the Westmore District, 4 little streets, nice and quiet. It's always been nice and quiet. I've been there for 25 years. We now have so many problems with the Westwood Motel that I would like to see that cleaned up. Those pictures have all been taken along the Westwood Motel. I took a series of them again today because while I understand that our resources with code enforcement and whatnot are limited, I think we need to put an ordinance into place that says if code enforcement comes to a business and the business cleans up one time, they get a pass. If they have to come back twice because they don't have their property cleaned up, then they should receive a small fine and let it continue. Yes, we need the revenue. We absolutely need the revenue in this city. However, when the police department is stretched so thin already, and they have to spend resources over there, taking one of our officers off the street to take somebody to jail for, what's going on at that hotel is costing us money. $250 a pop, plus that officer's wages while he's not on duty, because he has to stay there with his booking. So why not do something positive here with the city, put an ordinance into place, make these people responsible? And while I'm at it, that empty city lot is overgrown with weeds taller than me. Now, okay, I'm height challenged. However, I would still like to have that city lot cleaned up. Today I saw a man in a truck driving around Southport area, putting little signs nice and neat into all the little dried up areas that say, why is this area dry? And it's explaining the drought. We all know we're in a drought. Instead of putting resources into signs and somebody's wages to go around and pounding signs into hardened dirt, why aren't we using those resources to keep these city lots clean? Everybody deserves to have a clean area. I have paid my taxes here probably longer than a good majority of you, with maybe the exception of Mr. Kristoff. Because I've lived here my entire life. So, and my family was here before that. So what I would like to see is the city take action on this. I don't want to have to keep calling code enforcement. I have a long list of dates and times where I've talked to Jesse at CityWorks and Livia at Code Enforcement and left messages and talked to Lisa Cox. A long list. It's time to clean up the older part of West Sac. I pay my taxes just like the Southport people do. And I want my city clean, and I want the drug dealers and the prostitutes out of the Westwood Motel, and I want the Westwood Motel to be responsible and held responsible for their property. I'm under 3 minutes.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, those are the only requests we had under item 1A. I know I was already aware of the Westwood Motel issue. I know the city manager was too, because I know I and many other members of the council probably have forwarded some of the pictures that we've already seen. So in addition to the initial response, which I know the city staff's already been working on, we do in the case of motels, we have a motel standards operating ordinance that I think it might be useful if the staff takes a look at that and make sure that it includes appropriate provisions with respect to the kinds of trash accumulation that we've seen both in these photos and several others, or just walking or driving by. The other In addition to that, our properties have to be a model. I mean, it's a fine line, because when trash accumulates on our property and we clean it up the same morning, folks deposit more. It becomes, they start to see it as a way to deal with their large trash objects. And so it's this, like so many issues, this is a partnership between the city and neighbors to both act in appropriate ways, right? So we cannot solve everything, but we have to act as a model citizen ourselves. On the weed issue, I would hope you'll get back to us, Mr. City Manager, about the status of that, because you're plenty tall for a marker of what an inappropriate level of weeds are. So, and just I also want to add, we get similar issues and inquiries from all parts of the city. So last night I was at National Night Out parties, and this sort of challenge around trash, sometimes camps and others, is not restricted to any one area of West Sacramento. It's not restricted to any one area of the region or the country either. But it isn't, I mean, I'll just say, if there are plenty of neighborhoods in Southport that are also struggling with this as well. So it's a challenge for everyone in the community, partly a result of what's going on in the national economy and national level of social services, and state ones as well. So we're on it, but there's not some great nirvana, in some other neighborhood that is where there are police officers living and taking care of every problem in the moment. It's a challenge that we're facing in trying to deal with our resources citywide. The last thing I'd say, because this is an important issue that you brought up, which is the signs on the drought. You might be surprised. We've gotten lots and lots and lots and lots of inquiries and complaints just over the last week or so about, some trees are losing their leaves, and why aren't we watering them? And so, although for some folks it may be plainly apparent the drought's the reason for some of that, for others it needs a reminder. So there's a lot of points of view, lots of perspectives in the community on all sorts of issues, and so we're simply trying to make sure everyone knows what we're up to as well, and being as transparent as we can. All right, so those are the only requests on item 1A, so we're going to proceed to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there any reports or other communications this evening? Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On July 24th, I attended the Yolo County Housing Authority and also the Executive Commission on Homeless. Really, there were no items that I need to report, the administrative issues only. But on July 31st, I participated in a conference in Oakland, or actually in San Jose, sponsored by the California Fuel Cell Partnership. And this was basically, through the governor's office, a briefing for local electeds, local managers, city managers, and even businesses on what's coming down in terms of service stations now transforming over a period of years to hydrogen fueling stations. So I had the opportunity to drive down actually with the Fuel Cell Partnership in a fuel cell car, and was able to fuel up in Emeryville, and pretty much like any other gas station, filling the thing up. And but what's fascinating is we had 4 or 5 of the major car manufacturers that are going to be producing zero-emission hydrogen fuel cell cars starting next year. So the rush now is really to try to get fueling stations in. Now, West Sacramento, our fueling station, I think, is going to be up and running in October, I believe, this October. And it's going to be a public fueling station. So one of the areas of discussion was, the car manufacturers want the fueling stations in place so they can sell cars, and so it's a chicken or egg type of thing. So it was really trying to get folks excited about fuel cell, about learning how to site fuel cell filling stations throughout California, and they're looking like at 100 150 mile span between the stations, because each of the cars has between 3 to 350 miles of travel span. So we had some folks from Sacramento there. We had a good discussion about fleets, about how can we support fuel stations when they do come in, because it's, they're trying to put this in the private sector. Right now, Lindsay is going to be the fuel provider for the new station in West Sacramento, and they are typically just a gas manufacturer, gas like oxygen and compressed gas manufacturer. They don't really have any experience in retail. So what they want to do is try to create a situation where you have folks that have mini marts and fueling stations that can make these profitable. So some of these folks that are out promoting, the gas companies that are promoting these, are actually offering to pay the lease payments for 5 years for these stations, because the profit margin's so thin. So basically, you'd make money off of the markets. So it looks like the event in West Sacramento, when this opens, is going to be a big event. They anticipate at least inviting the governor to come, and I'm sure it'll be a good event for West Sacramento to show, since the California Fuel Cell Partnership is located here anyway. It was a really good discussion. We had, a lot of folks that were skeptical about the technology. A lot of it's going to be to educate the general public that if you get hit in a fuel cell car, there's not going to be a nuclear explosion. In fact, and that, is not that, that image is out there. But, how stable is a tank? The tanks basically have electronic solenoids on them that are closed and needs electricity to open up. So in the event of an accident, I think the tank will roll down the road, that type of thing. So they're very safe. They're going to be more reliable than cars are now because there's fewer moving parts. So I think we're really on kind of the cusp of this hydrogen revolution in California. So what they want to do is they want to get 3 in the Sacramento area, and they're going to be holding a mini briefing for the Sacramento leaders to look at siting 2 more in Sacramento. I know there's one that potentially is sited in Sacramento now, but they'll need another one. So they'll need a host company to actually host the station. They'll need a site to do it and go through all the permitting and get these things up and running as soon as possible. So it's going to be moving very quickly, and so it was a good conference, and I'm sure we'll have reporting in the future on this.
Any other reports or communications? Well, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson, for participating. The governor's office really, they called every day. Would West Sacramento please send somebody? It was they really were interested in our participation, and it meant a lot for having our vice mayor be present at that and so actively engaged in the session. Thank you for taking the time to go all the way out there to make that happen. I did want to note, I think a couple of my colleagues already know, last week I was appointed to be the chair of the United States Conference of Mayors Standing Committee on Jobs, Education, and the Workforce. It's one of the mayor's national committees. There's 6 national committees. The others are chaired by the mayors of Atlanta and Houston and a bunch of other cities that are slightly larger than ours. But it will have having a responsibility for education, higher education, but also career pathways, workforce development, unemployment, job creation, and a variety of workforce investment boards, and a variety of other policy initiatives and coordination services across the country. So I'm very proud of it. But it also is going to be, we're going to be bringing a group of mayors here for a session on preschool and also on workforce development and the alignment of things like using as an example our food hub strategy with job creation, and then linked to educational pathways to assure that local residents have access to the jobs, the high-quality, high-paying jobs that those kinds of industries create. So it will provide another opportunity for some more national spotlight on the good work that's happening in our community. So I'm excited about it. All right, so if there's no others, then we have item 1C, which is appointments to boards and commissions, and I did want to make 2. These will be relatively short-term because they extend till the end of November. But I'd like to appoint Dean Hackison, who I think you all remember, to the Housing Advisory Commission, who did the most extensive commission interview that we've ever had, as well as Anthony Volkart to the Parks and Community Services Commission, and both of their applications and you've received previously. So I would make those 2 appointments and ask if there's a motion to confirm them. All right, it's been moved moved by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson and seconded by Councilmember Sandin. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion carries. Thank you. That brings us then to the consent agenda, which is items 2 through 7. Are there any items on the consent agenda any member of the council wishes to remove, or any item for separate question or comment? And is there a motion on the consent agenda? It's been
second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson and seconded by Councilmember Ledesma. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion carries. Item 8 is a public hearing in consideration of Resolution 14-15, certifying a list of additional code enforcement charges, directing that a lien be placed on the subject properties and requesting inclusion of these charges on the secured tax roll in order that they may be collected in the same manner as general taxes. The city manager has requested that this item be pulled from the agenda since the property the subject property has paid the outstanding charges and the lien is no longer needed. So without objection, that will be the order. Item 9 then is continued public hearing and consideration of Resolution 14-41, adopting a community development block grant program income use reuse agreement with the state of California. Ms. Collis.
Good evening. We came before the council on July 16th to discuss the program income reuse plan. Unfortunately, at that time, the state of California had not released its new template reuse plan, but that came out last Wednesday, so we're back before the council asking that this document be approved. The document covers program income, which are receipts that are received from activities that have been funded in the past with community development block grant funds. These are HUD funds from the federal government that we receive through the state small cities program. The reuse plan in the past was specific and said where the city would place its funds. We had a housing rehab revolving loan fund, we had a business revolving loan fund, and we could say where we were placing the funds. The new template reuse plan is not specific. It's simply an agreement between the city and the state stating that we will follow all the HUD and state rules regarding program income. So it's very simple. Well, it's actually much longer and more complicated, but there really is no decision-making involved as far as how we want to approach it. It's just the template. We basically put in the city's name and we're done. That's all I have about that. Do you have any questions?
All right. Mr. Kristoff.
Did Delta Lane get scratched from receiving some of the funds?
We submitted a request to use our program income for Delta Lane, and it has not yet been approved. The state will not approve it at this point in time because they are trying to develop new documentation for contracts that use program income, and they do not have their contract language approved yet through all their contracting and legal processes. So we're waiting on them to get that done.
But we're not going to spend everything so that when we finally get the data from the state, we'll be able to apply that data to the Delta Lane project?
At this point in time, we have several open grants. If we continue those activities, we have to use program income. So we are burning up a little bit of the money that we had set aside for Delta Lane until we can get the state to approve that and actually get Delta Lane constructed. We do continually receive small amounts of program income throughout the year, so we can absorb a little bit of that because we're continually getting more in, but if it continues too long, it could be a concern.
Well, the council had said that Delta Lane was an important project, and that's where we wanted some of these dollars to go. So how do we make sure we reserve enough capacity, space, or whatever you want to call it, so that we can move forward on Delta Lane project?
That is a very good question, and we've asked HCD that very same question and really received no response at this time. Basically, we have projects that are underway. We have contracts with people. We can't just stop paying on them. That's a difficult question, and I don't have an answer for you. We have tried, but we have not been able to get an answer.
Well, would you let us know when you find out?
We're doing our best to keep the city manager and everyone informed as we move forward with this.
All right, any other questions at this time? Seeing none, we're going to reopen the public hearing. And we do have a couple of requests to speak on this. The first is by Christine Amy.
Thank you, and good evening, council members and Mayor. I'm here tonight because I was in favour of the Delta Lane project and representing our community, the Washington District, just to let you know that we're all so excited about the leadership and moving towards eradicating the blighted, rundown, inappropriate housing that a lot of low-income residents live in the Washington District. So I was here tonight to give kudos and say, yeah, let's do Delta Lane, and let's do another project like Delta Lane even further into the Broderick District so that we can have these people move into more appropriate housing. So yeah, we'll be anxious to hear the update on that as well, and hopefully we will have the funding for that when it comes through. Thank you.
Thanks. John Freeman.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor. My name's John Freeman. I live in the Washington District. I've been in West Sacramento in that district for more than 10 years. And I'm here also tonight to support the Delta Lane project, as well as when I read the report, it also indicated some of the money would be utilized for the homeless outreach coordinator position. So I'm in support of both of those, the money being allocated in both of those areas. While I'm here, I also want to mention that the Washington District now has two Facebook web pages. One is a users group, and a lot of the community talks through that group. So sometimes you might want to get on there maybe and take a look at some of the comments that are going around. And the other one is the name of that one is the Washington District Community Vision for Parks and Recreation. That's the users group. And then there's a Washington District West Sacramento, which is an actual page that's set up to be like an archive of all the new development that's going to be going on, like the streetcar, the different development projects, the new businesses in town, like Third Strike Cafe and whatnot. So I thank you for your time, and that's it.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, we'll close the public hearing and return to the council. There were no questions raised for Louise that she hadn't raised herself. I mean, don't give up on this project. I mean, every single project we've ever built of any kind has had at least 17 stops before it gets done. So we are used to adversity and to challenges and to state agencies or the laws of physics getting in our way. But we're still committed to the project. It's a very important project for the area, for the community, for the folks who will be living there. So what you were going to say, we still appreciate that. So, all right. Any other questions or discussion from members of the council on this item? All right. We still need a motion though. So, is there a motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
All right. It's been moved by Mr. Ledesma, seconded by Ms. Dandine. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 10 is a public hearing in consideration of Resolution 14-43, expanding the preferential permit parking program, Area B. Mr. Doherty.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Sorry. Chris Doherty, Transportation Program Specialist with the Public Works Department. The item in front of you this evening is a request to expand the Area B of the preferential permit parking area from the Washington District to the Bridge District. The B parking area has been a successful tool to protect overflow on-street parking from the Washington residents, from the developments along the river, and from events at Raley Field. And staff is recommending at this point to expand it to the Bridge District now that we have new residential developments coming online very shortly. As this was envisioned in the Bridge District specific plan, this will protect the new residents and the current residents in the Ironworks development from overflow event parking from Raley Field and events happening in the Bridge District. Outreach for this project included the Ironworks Homeowners Association, and they were in support of this project. The current 90-minute parking that is in the Bridge District will remain. Just those who hold a B permit and visitor passes will be exempt from that. And that concludes my presentation. I'm open to any questions you may have.
Questions? Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson?
Yeah, thank you for the outreach. So Ironworks did you do any outreach to any of the other property owners in the Bridge District to kind of get a read on this?
We had been talking to Fulcrum Properties throughout the process, but no one is living there yet. This was more of the outreach to the residents in the district. But
Okay,
Fulcrum and the property owners have been expecting this as well.
thanks.
Have you had discussions with the River Cats?
We have not, but they were aware that this was going through because it does still eliminate any on-street parking for events in the district.
Because I think there will be people that contact the River Cats about, oh, I lost my parking place over there. I had this secret spot that I used to be able to park in all the time. And I think that it would be just a good idea, a little public outreach to the River Cats themselves as far as what you're doing.
Can do that.
Maybe you could ask them to tell us what they're doing on the free parking for all games approach too, while you're at it, while we're having that conversation. Right? Other questions at this time? All right, then we're going to open the public hearing on item 10. We don't have any requests to speak on this item, but because it is a public hearing, does anyone wish to address the council on item 10? Seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing on this one and return it to the council. So Chris, I want to ask you, this is just an extension of what we had approved as part of the Bridge District Plan in the first place.
Yes.
And the Washington area, the program area B was based in some part on what we had started the very first time. I remember like the first year I was on the council, over on like Longcroft and Clarendon, near where River City High School used to be. This approach to parking management and urban parking management is, it's tried and true, it's time tested, it's also 20, 30 years old. There's a lot of sort of more innovative approaches around parking management. I'm just curious, we're doing this, we said this is how we were going to do it, but as we get closer to, full build out and the sort of congestion and alternative uses and everything that we're expecting in this district, whether a simple 90-minute permanent parking approach is really going to be the right solution. I'm a little skeptical, so I'm curious if we're looking at other, perhaps more innovative ways of addressing parking in the district on public streets.
We definitely are. We're going to be in a point of transition for parking management for a while until build-out happens. So this is a good transitional step for the time being. Yes, it is a tried and true method. It does help protect residential development from some of the shorter quick turnaround on-street parking uses that will be coming to this district. So it will be actively managed as time goes on.
Anything else on item 10? Is there a motion?
Move the recommended action.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Christoph and seconded by Mr. Ledesma. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you. Item 11 is a public hearing and first reading of ordinance 14-10, amending the West Riverview LLC development agreement. Ms. White?
Good evening, Mayor Cabal and the members of the City Council. West Sac Rivers is requesting an amendment to the development agreement that was approved for the Rivers Phase 2 project on June 14, 2006. The original development agreement covers a vesting tentative submap covering approximately 63 acres and a 5-acre site located east of Fountain Drive and south of the Regatta condominiums. When the development agreement was executed in 2006, the entire 68 acres were owned by West Riverview. Since then, 63 acres were conveyed to West Sac Rivers in 2012. The 5-acre site was conveyed to JTS Communities in July 2006, and JTS Communities subsequently conveyed the 5-acre site of a parcel to the state of California in 2010. And since the state is not a party to the proposed amendment, the amendment would only affect the 63 acres owned by West Sac Rivers. The development agreement is set to expire on June 14, 2016, and the developer is requesting that the agreement be extended to June 2021. And since the developer purchased the 63 acres in 2012, the additional time is needed to construct the infrastructure that is needed to support the project and allow the developer time to develop the project and build it out as it was approved. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this item on August 6th and adopted Resolution 14-3 PC recommending that the City Council approve the proposed request to amend the development agreement. Staff is recommending that the City Council conduct a public hearing, waive the first reading and read by title and number only ordinance 14-10, amending the West Riverview Development Agreement, and inform the audience that the second reading and adoption of the ordinance is scheduled for August 20th, 2014. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions that the council may have.
Are there questions at this time? All right, see, then we're going to open the public hearing, and we have one request to speak, and it's by the applicant, Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for considering this matter tonight. Appreciate it. I'm Clifton Taylor, Vice President of Richland Communities, representing the applicant, West Sac Rivers LLC. We appreciate staff's work on this matter and the collaboration that they've afforded us since we acquired the project in 2012. We're very excited to be doing business in the city of West Sacramento and owning the Rivers project. As you mentioned, we've been working with the city, state, and federal agencies to identify the infrastructure obligations and permit obligations to bring the project forward, and we believe the 5-year time frame is what will be needed to meet the balance, or complete the balance of improvements and see the development through to conclusion. I know we have another matter coming up a little bit later that deals with one of the development agreement obligations. I believe regardless of the outcome of that issue, we believe the 5-year extension from 2016 will give us adequate time to resolve any issues and move the project forward successfully. So I'm here if you have any questions for me.
Thank you. All right, we have no other requests to speak on this item, so we'll close the public hearing, return to the council. Mr. Kristoff.
Sandra, they have 68 acres, and then 5 of those acres was pulled off, and eventually they ended up in the state of California's hands. So you had 63 acres, and on that 63 acres, they wanted to put 220 single-family lots, a 2-acre park, and then 4 large lots for high-density residential development. Where does the 176 residential units come in?
That comes in
It's okay. Thank you.
That would be the additional 176 units that could be constructed on the school lot in the event that a school was not developed. So that would come to a total, with the school, you're talking about a build-out of approximately 626 units with the school. Without a school, you're talking about 802 units.
So what you're saying is 176 units could be put on a 5-acre parcel?
The 176 units could be put on the site that's slated for a school.
Which is a 5-acre parcel?
No, it's a 12-acre parcel.
Oh, it's 12.
It's a
And then they
12-acre
want
parcel.
7 to build the school. Well, we'll get that later. And, okay. Okay. I guess my concern is since we're given a 5-year extension on, or they want to receive a 5-year extension on this, I would hope that we could start to plan this community maybe a little bit better. I mean, I realize they want to pound up houses and you know, get things done, but, you know, they've started a pretty decent project over there, and people seem to be pretty happy at the Rivers. And I want to make sure that we continue that. I don't want something that puts a lot of high density in that particular area because it, number one, it's already dense enough. And I know there are some people out there want to put it, put much, much higher density because they want to turn those houses over. But I mean, I think we need to make sure that we protect, or we at least sympathize with the people at the rivers so that they're not negatively impacted. And I think we can do that through a planning process. And so it'll be interesting to see as this project continues, how all of that will eventually shake out. But those are my thoughts as far as just make sure we get, high-quality development and high-quality homes and continue the pattern that, we've had and make sure that we develop that community into something that all the neighborhoods can be pretty proud of.
Other questions or comments? Well said. All right, is there a motion then on this item? It's just the second recommended action to waive the first reading. Okay, moved by Councilmember Sandine and seconded by
Yeah, I'll second.
Mr. Ledesma. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion carries.
Mr.
and
Mayor,
we're just
can
doing-
I confirm that this is with the revision that's in the memo to you, the one change in the recital?
Yes.
Yes.
So the change to the recital B.
Thank you.
Yes. And we're just to inform the audience that the second reading and adoption of this ordinance is scheduled for August 20th. All right, item 12 is a consideration of a proposal to develop Lot 504 in the River Phase 2 project with a public charter school and housing. And there, as with item 11, there is a memo at your desk from the city manager as well, accompanying this item. Ms. White?
The Rivers Phase 2 project includes, as Mr. Christoph had mentioned, a vesting map involving the subdivision of 63 acres into 220 single-family lots, a 2-acre private park, and 4 large lots for high-density residential, and 1 12.3-acre parcel for a future school located at the northwest corner of Lighthouse Drive and Fountain Drive. The alternative use of the proposed school site would be the development of 176 residential units. When the development agreement was approved in 2006, the council wanted assurances that Lot 504, which is a 12-acre parcel, would be developed with the school, and language was memorialized in the development agreement to this effect. And the development agreement specifically states that the lot is intended for use as a school and cannot be used for any other purposes without prior approval of the city council. In lieu of developing the entire 12.3 acres for a school, West Sac Rivers is proposing to develop 7 acres with a public charter school and the remaining 5 acres with 66 residential units. The school board approved a charter petition for the charter school on November 13, 2013, which is slated to open in August 2015, provided that this proposal is endorsed by the city council. Based on the most recent preliminary site plan, the initial phase of the school would include 12 classrooms for grades K through 12, additional buildings for support staff, school-related activities, and parking. Go to the next slide. Next slide. This is a site plan that shows the very first preliminary site plan, which shows the school and a housing in the back. And the next slide shows a revised site plan showing, showing the Phase 1 for the school and Phase 2 for the school. Phase 2 for the school would include additional classrooms for grades 6 through 8, a multi-purpose building, and a sports field. The housing proposed on the remaining 5 acres will not result in an increase of residential units proposed for the Rivers Phase 2 project. There is a water storage facility that is planned for the Rivers Phase 2, and it would be near the proposed school on land zoned for high-density residential. So the proposed housing on the remaining 5 acres of the 12-acre site will recapture housing units that would be lost when the water storage facility is constructed. Lastly, staff had received written communication from Gavin McHugh, who was a resident of the Rivers Project, regarding the school proposal. In lieu of developing housing on the remaining 5 acres, he had expressed some opposition and recommended that the city consider developing the 5 acres with the open space. And this afternoon, I received an email communication from him, and he had mentioned that he has withdrawn his opposition. He is supportive of the charter school proposal. In conclusion, staff is recommending that the city council approve the request to develop Lot 504 with a 7-acre public charter school and housing on the remaining 5 acres, subject to the school receiving approval from the State Department of Education. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions that the city council may have.
Are there questions for staff?
I do.
Mr. Christoph?
Sandra, the school, if I read this correctly, it looks like they're going to put modulars, or they're going to use
They're going-
trailers or whatever.
No, they will not be trailers. They're going to be manufactured buildings, and they are buildings that are approved by the state architect, and so they are recognized as permanent buildings. So they won't have any wheels, they're not going to have any axles.
I understand. They look like trailers, but that's okay. That's not what I had envisioned at all for the school that would go into that area. I believe that what needs to happen from an aesthetic perspective is they need to build a school. It needs to come from ground up to actually build a school. And, I understand how when you have a rapid increase in students in a particular district, how there becomes a need for these trailers, modular homes, or whatever it is that they put in there for a classroom. But at the same time, we have an opportunity today to make sure that the school that goes in there is something that the community's going to be very, very proud of, and that it is really aesthetically pleasing. There's a lot of different designs that they could use now for brand-new schools. I understand they're expensive, but people are asking for additional densities, or asking for additional homes to be constructed, or whatever else. And I think that's just the price of doing business. That when we have a community such as the Groupie or the Rivers community over there, we need to do everything that we can to make sure that it is a very high quality constructed facilities that also go into that area. So that's where I come from. I mean, I realize we have a public hearing. No, we don't.
Nope.
Nope. But anyway, so, I mean, I don't know if further negotiations need to take place. I don't know what needs to happen, but that's my 2 cents worth. That's just what I think.
Just for your information, we don't have design review purview over the school facilities in the Rivers District, but there is a Rivers Design Review Committee that would have to sign off on the buildings that will be used for the charter school.
Sure.
Is that, the Rivers Design Review, is that part of their,
HOA, I understand.
yeah, thank you, their housing association? So, if I may, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So, thanks, Mr. Kristoff, because a large part of my questioning was around that process of the school design elements and who has purview over that, because this Rivers development has, I can recall this discussion some time ago, even back at Planning Commission, as Councilmember Cindy nods her head, this has been coming up quite a bit over the years, but now they have at least a viable school looking at it, and it sounds like the community is supportive of having the school there. The issue is over the remaining acreage and how that is utilized. So my questions, well, let me go back to the design process. So we have no purview, there's no other kind of stopping ground at Planning Commission or anything else in regards to?
That is correct.
Okay. And I am not clear, I'm not an expert on school construction design rules, ordinances, but if there's some, I guess I'll have to research that to find out what this might actually look like, or what's the minimum requirements, just to, so I can understand what it is that they propose to put there. But I would strongly encourage the developer to kind of look at that site and making sure that as this is proposed, whatever we can do to make this a aesthetically pleasing part of the community, that would be perfect. On the remaining 5+ acres, I'm a little, I'm trying to understand, is the housing necessary to fulfill our development agreement as part of what's been proposed? Because originally it contemplated the full 12.3 acres. And so we never really anticipated in our DA that housing would be.
That is correct, but when we processed the environmental document and the map, it took in consideration that in the event that a school was not going to be located on that lot, then an additional 176 units could be
built.
A maximum could be built on there. So I would say that housing, was contemplated as an alternative use.
And I was having a hard time kind of looking at the map that showed kind of the preliminary site plan that they had. I'm not sure if you can put that up. I just want to make sure I'm clear on sort of the proximity of the housing to the school and so forth that they're looking at. Do you happen to have that? So as you're pulling that up, in the map that's in our package, it looks as though there'll be a fence line and/or trees, whatever, separating the school property from and the ball field, if I'm looking at the right attachment, from the housing project. And they'll all be facing, I think that's northward. So there'll be some separation between.
There should be separation, yes, I'm
And
sorry.
is it a gated, is it fenced area, tree, landscape?
This is just very preliminary, so I can't
Yeah.
speak to whether or not it's going to be fenced, gated.
Okay.
Other than having the landscaping, I would make an assumption that would be some fencing there, should be fencing there.
Okay,
But this is very, very preliminary.
okay. All right, thank you. I was just trying to get clarification on that. I have no other questions.
Sandine?
Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering, Ms. White, if you have concerns about the phasing, phase 1, phase 2 of the school project. Are there any concerns within the city in terms of the pacing of that, or concerns about leaving the phase 2 open for a certain period of time, safety-wise, or any other concerns in
Not
that
at this
regard? I
time.
noticed that it's like split in half.
No, this is what the developer has presented to us in terms of what they're proposing, and I think a lot of it has to do with the funding. Phase 1 will be, they will not receive any state funds for the phase 1 project, and as funds are received, from the state, then they will be able to build out Phase 2. So I think that was one of the reasons why it's being Phase 1 and Phase 2. And I believe the developer and the charter school representative can answer more specifically as to why it was phased as such, but that's what
That's helpful. I think the time pressure with the school opening requirement with the federal grant of August 2015, I'm sure put some pressure as well. And I would echo my colleague, Mr. Ledesma, about just in terms of aesthetics, as much as possible to have that in the minds of as the development moves forward. So, thank you.
Member Pro Tem Johannesson?
So part of the obligation here is to create public access along the river, a pathway. So it looks like it's going to be basically two segments. One is going to go a little bit east of Rivercrest to the river with an outlook, and the balance will be more of an improved pathway along the river. That goes into the area where the state parks, right, is going to, we're still looking at the Indian Heritage Center.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
How much didn't you hear?
No, it does not. No.
They're not obligated to, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the pathway obligation. Let me see if I can find it again here.
Talking about the exhibit, or?
Well, there's an exhibit, Exhibit F, basically shows, is the description of it.
Are you looking at the development agreement itself?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No, the development agreement. So, I mean, I think that addresses kind of the concern that we had of the resident and having the open space, because I think what this project is going to do is actually help open up the riverfront to people as well. And so I guess, I wanted to point that out, and also just to, we do have this sort of deal going with the Indian Heritage Center still. So is this on the land that facility would occupy? And is it part of because we have an obligation to build out a pathway based on that project already.
Oh, that's a pathway. Okay, no, it's across, yeah. No.
Okay. All right, but I mean, the pathway still is part of the obligation of this development agreement.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
That doesn't go away. That has not gone away.
All right, well, that's fine, thanks.
Tell me, what's projected enrollment for the school?
Pardon me?
Projected enrollment?
I don't know what that enrollment is. I think the developer would be able to answer that question.
All right, well, maybe the developer could take a couple of notes, because to me, that's a pretty central question, right? So especially given the modifications that we've been given from the city manager, I had a couple of questions related to those, because the amendment to the recommended action is that we essentially make it contingent on, subject to the school receiving approval from the State Department of Education. And charter schools that have been approved by the local Board of Education aren't subject to approval by the State Department of Education. So I'm not sure exactly what that means. The department has responsibility for issuing a number to the school. So the school submits a package to the state, but it's simply a long list of data elements. What's your address? When did you get approved? How many students are you going to have? But it's not a discretionary approval per se. It's simply the issuance of a number. Okay, your charter school number 2003. So that wouldn't qualify there. The state has some role to play in facility review if the school is anticipating some form of state contribution to the ultimate facility, and the state has preferred guidelines for how many acres a site ought to be for a certain number of students and other requirements as well. So, but that's not approval of the school, right? So making this action contingent on school approval seems not like unless I'm missing something, it doesn't seem like the right thing. It's either the state agreeing to the facility funding stream or whatever certification they need in order to accomplish that, or the school getting its number issued by the state. But state approval isn't I don't think it's the right thing. So maybe as advisor, either the school or the developer, if you're not aware of all the arcane charter school law, and it is complicated, and I know I wrote a few of them, then that would be helpful to know as well. And then just sort of, if the school folks are here, I'm curious, so this is the one part of West Sacramento, well, everything north of the railroad tracks in West Sacramento is the only part of West Sacramento that's not in the Delta. And so if this were the Rockland Academy, which is also a highly successful charter school in another community, the Delta Charter School being a very high-quality charter school that is in Clarksburg, recently formed in charter school, very popular and does well, but it's called Delta because it's in the Delta, it's in the River Delta Unified School District. The Rivers is not in the Delta. So I'm just curious as to whether this is a working title for the name or whether we're developing sort of national brand reputation from the Clarksburg School, or whether where the consideration was given to a name that might be more that might match up better with the actual neighborhood in which the school exists.
It's being called the Lighthouse Charter School.
Ah, okay, great, perfect. Even better. All right. So with respect to the other questions, maybe, I don't know maybe if it's Clifton directly, if we can get some answers on those. If you could come up to the microphone so all the thousands of viewers at home can hear your comments, that would be great.
I guess I can talk to the business terms of the development and the technical aspects of the school and the construction, and I defer to Peter Stone from Delta. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you again for taking up this matter tonight. Again, I'm Clifton Taylor with Richland Communities, representing the current owners of the Rivers. We appreciate staff's work on this matter and the recommendation to approve the proposal for a charter school on 7 acres with 5 acres balance allowed to develop with the underlying residential zoning that was contemplated with the original EIR and project approvals. As you're aware, a development restriction was placed on parcel 504, encouraging development as a school site. You're probably also aware that the Washington Unified School District determined a new school facility was not financially justifiable within the Rivers based upon current enrollment. Shortly after Richland acquired the balance of development in the Rivers, a parent approached us regarding the possibility of a charter school in light of the district's determination that a public school would not be built. Interest took hold through stakeholder outreach and was conducted directly and through the community association. This led to a parent committee and their decision to collaborate with an existing charter school. They decided to collaborate with an existing charter school to increase their likelihood of success. Ultimately, the parent committee conducted interviews and the Delta Elementary Charter School was selected as a partner. The two groups successfully obtained charter approval from the Washington Unified School District for campus in the Rivers last year. The main challenge for developing a charter school, as with most projects, is the funding. In this case, it's compounded by the project's obligation, the Rivers project's obligation to pay school fees to the district, who is not a financial contributor to the charter school. Washington Unified will, under all circumstances, collect per square foot development fees on the development and is not making any financial contributions to the project. In fact, Phase 2 of the Rivers will contribute over $4 million in school fees, in addition to the over $4 million already paid by Phase 1, none of which will be used for development of the charter. Under a typical school model, a landowner would be paid to receive fee credits for delivery of the school site. In this case, we're obligated to pay fees and neither receive a school nor consideration for the land. And so, in collaborating with the charter folks, we determined that it was unlikely, infeasible if they had to either pay for the land or absorb all the improvement costs associated with the school. And so we looked for alternative arrangements where we could satisfy the development restriction that was placed on the project. And what we came up with was a business arrangement between the parties to manage the challenge by establishing a 7-acre campus. And by reducing the size and allowing a modest amount of additional residential development, we would be able to gift the site to the Lighthouse Charter, and we would be able to construct certain recreational field improvements along with associated with their Phase 2 of development. So that makes Richland both is giving the site to the charter school and completing some improvements in their Phase 2 that would be facilitated when they receive additional funding through what they're expecting to be a state contribution. So we feel like the parties have collaborated and compromised to get to a solution that we know we can move forward on. We're satisfied with the arrangement, and I think if accepted by the council, we believe the charter school would be a good addition to the city and would definitely be valued by the residents within the Rivers, and we've received a lot of support for our efforts on this to date by the members of the Rivers community. I think relative to parcel, there's a couple questions that come up, and I'll just try to address those briefly. Relative to the additional density and the high intensity of housing addressed by Mr. Kristoff. You notice the exhibit that we promoted single-family housing at basically the low end of the target range for the zoning district that underlies that parcel. We've attempted not to change the zoning for any of the initial approvals and respect the initial approvals for that. And I think as time is showing, ultimately the development is going to be towards the lower end of the ultimate range. And I believe relative to the pathway along the entire Rivers levee frontage has actually been constructed as a decomposed granite pathway on land that is leased from the state and managed by the association. However, the lookout that you referenced is an obligation of the project and is included in the encroachment permit that is hopefully going to be considered by the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, I believe on September 19th. And then Peter can correct me, but I think the school targets K through 8, 600 students is the expected enrollment. And, I just recognize, we're in the process of formalizing an agreement with the charter folks to convey the property and deal with our respective, post-transfer obligations to one another. Obviously, that agreement, and I assume, any action that you guys would take here tonight is going to be dependent upon them receiving all necessary approvals from the local district to show compliance with their charter and, be authorized to move forward with an opening for August of 2015. So with that, I can address any other questions you have for me.
Well, maybe Jennifer can help on them as well. Is it Jennifer from the school that's here, did you say?
Peter Stone.
Oh, Peter Stone, okay. I thought you said Jennifer or something, so maybe Peter can help with those issues. Because I'm trying to get a sense of what I definitely don't want to do is grant approval for this, and then you go off and start building housing on the remaining acreage, and then the school doesn't get the state funding that it's counting on, or there's a lot of contingencies to develop the level of school that you want. I mean, I wish we were still in the world where somebody had all the money to build the perfect school at the beginning. That's extraordinarily challenging, even for the district and particularly for a charter. If it were up to me, we would have, the charter school would have been located at one of the existing school facilities that has excess capacity and could have made a Proposition 39 claim and used whatever resources it had to improve that facility. I understand that was a path that wasn't chosen both because of the interest of the neighbors and because this site we have designated already in our plan for a new school as well. So that would have been, to me, that would have been a more ideal, like, social engineering solution. That's not where we are. But I do understand so it was 600 students, K-8, single span or multi-track?
Yeah, K-8, two sections per grade until you get to 7, and then you'd have 3 sections ultimately. Starting off with about 240 to 292 on day 1, August 2015.
And can you describe a little bit of the facility finance strategy? I mean, what do you need for,
Well,
what are you assuming in terms of opening in 2015 and beyond?
One of the keys is what Mr. Taylor just said about the fact that none of the development fees come to us. So what we have already done is we have applied for a state matching bond grant with the assumption we have about 5 years to get to the 600 enrollment. And once we do, then we've got the money for a phase 2. That could be up to $15 million to work on a phase 2. But phase 1, the primary focus on phase 1 is the SB 740 money, which is leased facilities that the state reimburses at 75%. But it's done in arrears. So what we have to do is get initial construction funding. So what we do plan to do is get funding as soon as we get approvals, loans, funding, whatever it takes to actually get the initial designs more than just the sketches that we've shown so far, and then move to full funding that will take care of both the construction and then the financing until we get some of the reimbursements from the state. Those reimbursements, by the way, are capped to $750 per student per year, so the enrollment is very critical. So the first year we've got a cap based on 292 students, and then we grow the grades as we go until we get to the 600.
So so then the $15 million, what happens if that does not materialize?
Well, and in fact, the interesting thing is to go after that money, you have to be willing to use prevailing wage for a whole lot of it. So that's about a third of the cost of the project. So if you didn't have that money, it would only cost $10 million. You know, the construction you could do with $10 million is what it will take $15 million to do. So the financing, what we're looking at, one of the keys is that we're from Friends of Clarksburg School. That's the nonprofit that actually does business as Delta and does business as Lighthouse. So we're not having a separate entity, and the key there is we get 7 years of financials with strong financial results that are the basis and a strong banking relationship right now. So we're not necessarily counting on that state money to come through, but we're actually looking to do what we can to recoup as much as we can from the state SB 740 money. I think one of the keys, the other question that had been asked was with regard to how it works with the state and the selection of the site. A long time ago, I met with the California Department of Ed's school facilities planning group. We walked the site, we looked at it, they did a full analysis, and their preliminary report says this is an excellent school site. And of course, they were looking at it for 12 acres. And I spoke with the superintendent, Dayton Gillian, and we talked about the sizing. He had a little bit of a concern that the 7 acres might not be sufficient, but it was more, would the California Department of Ed be okay with that sizing? So I went back to the facilities planning group, actually showed them this exact plan that we just took a look at. And if I can just read a quote from the letter I got back from them. Well, it's not an approval because there's about 19 different steps you have to go through. You have to go through toxic studies, all kinds of different studies that we plan to go through. But their statement was the components for such a program, looking at the map that we gave, and enrollment as you projected appear to be in place and adequate. So what in essence they're saying is they're looking for all the dots, the I's to be dotted and the T's crossed. If that's done, they should be fine with a 7-acre site configured pretty much as we have it. We also did, one of the keys you have to look at is how close you are to an airport. The Highway Patrol has the airport in West Sac, and fortunately, we're just a little bit outside the range. So that can be a complete showstopper if you've got an airport issue. And so the site does not have that issue. The other thing that was interesting, between the two plans, the first one, the color drawing that showed the school and the houses, the school was laid out on the flat, which meant the entire site had to be graded. That would mean that all the trees, basically all the old trees would come down, the mature trees. One of the things we did is we took a look at it and said, hey, if we put the ball fields on the other side, over by the apartments, then we could go and take and put the school actually up in the site, just doing some minimal grading to put the various buildings in place and actually maintain a whole lot of the mature trees and have a site that would be just very aesthetically pleasing from that standpoint, working with what's there as opposed to just trying to, grade the whole place. And another element of that is the cost. It's very expensive to grade that amount of terrain to get it down to what was shown in the original plan. So that's another element that we're looking at. And by the way, we have the school in Clarksburg, we just had our retreat for our teachers and everything. We had the founders. talking about, we actually put the school in Clarksburg in about 3 months. Okay? And so when we did that, we've not only done that, that had to be through DSA. And so we got the Division of State Architect. We've done 3 subsequent projects. And so we've jumped through a whole lot of hoops. And the real key on going through the site planning with the California Department of Ed and getting their approval, the first phase can be done with California building codes with the city of West Sac. And because we've got it as a CDE-approved site, then a subsequent phase can be done with the Division of State Architect and with state money.
Understood. I'm not worried about that all of the approvals all happening. I mean, that this is well within the acreage requirements. I mean, you could put 1,400 students or something in
Yeah.
a 7 acre, so I don't think that's an issue with the site. I'm just trying to, what I absolutely want to make sure we are bulletproof on is that we don't have housing starting in the summer of next year, and then in the fall, you come forward and say, you know what, we weren't able to pull that school off. And then we've got to find somebody else that can make a school fit in the 7 acres and get that all to, that's just, that would be a completely unacceptable situation.
Right.
And I think that's why the city manager has proposed this language about it being contingent on the school receiving approval from CDE. I'm just not convinced yet that that's quite it's the school's approval is a foregone conclusion. That's not what you're trying to get.
Right.
You're trying to lay the groundwork for future funding, but that's a more nuanced, more complex contingency than simply the approval of the school.
Right, and one of the key things that we've really appreciated is the help from city staff in working through where we are to this point. We've got a meeting next Wednesday to have the preliminary, because we have to understand the costs from all the permitting and all of what it takes for the site before we start committing the
One other
resources.
question, this is with respect to the HOA. So if in a regular school facility is exempt from all of our reviews and zoning and everything else. What you're saying that the charter school in this context is subject to the architectural review committee of the HOA?
And I think that's Mr. Taylor's purview.
Maybe you
that
could
he would know.
enlighten us about that. It's a new legal nuance I hadn't experienced before.
Yeah, everything in the rivers is subject to the design review board. However, I don't know that the approval of the school would be any different for us than it is for you guys. I assume the state would regulate almost all aspects of the design approval. I think interesting, and for disclosure, the design review committee is myself. So just so you're aware when you're talking about because Richland is currently the founder, and so we've retained the rights until a certain amount of development occurs, and then those rights get conveyed over to, appointed members of the association. So I think we, as the owner of the land and conveyor could collaborate with the district to apply certain standards, but ultimately the state is going to be the decider of what facilities are acceptable or not.
In our case, the schools are they're exempt from our planning and zoning requirements in most cases. So there's two sides of this coin, right? In the sense that getting input from the immediate neighborhood is useful. We want to protect their interests. This is not going to be a Rivers school. This is a public charter school available to students from all over. And so I'm a little concerned about the HOA having some sort of special legal power over a school that is not like the pool for the residents of the Rivers. It is a school that is to serve the whole neighborhood and the whole community.
I'll be honest, the area that we're talking about has not been annexed in the association, and the discussions we've had is that the best solution would be for that area not to be annexed in, and therefore would just be outside the association and outside entirely. Phase 2 of the Rivers is eligible to be annexed into the existing association, but to date has not been. And so if that's something that would make the council more comfortable that it would guaranteed that it would not be, that would be a very acceptable condition. I think another compromise that we envision, obviously, relative to the 5 acres of residential on the parcel 504, we find it completely reasonable that development not be allowed to commence there until phase one of the school was constructed, if that was something that made the council more comfortable to understand that at least all of the thresholds were met to get to that milestone where a school is moving forward. Because, from our business plan standpoint, our intention is not for that 5 acres to be the next phase coming out of the ground in the rivers.
Okay. All right, thank you. Other questions or comments? Mr. Kristoff?
Yeah, just a question or a comment. I agree with where you're headed, Mr. Mayor, as far as it would be a travesty to see the development of those apartment complexes or condos or whatever they're being proposed, and then not have, for whatever reason, not have the school constructed or built. Sandra, is there something that we can do along those lines that ensure that the school is being constructed and if not, that the housing cannot proceed? You can amend the development agreement.
We
I
can amend
would
the recommended action. The recommended action.
To do what Mr. Taylor said, essentially?
Yes, we can
Okay.
add some language, revise the recommended action.
Question number
Are you pressing your button, Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, I agree. I think your recommended action could be that the authorization to construct the housing is effective upon certificate of occupancy or first day of operations. You could say first day of operations with an enrollment not less than X, if you want to get that specific. But we can certainly come up with some language if you just let us know what you want the trigger event to be.
Well, it seems like the kind of school these people want to build, they want to bring in 12 trailers or whatever it is and line them up and say, okay, we're open for business. It seems like that's something that is doable, it's quick, and, you can get it done within a very, very short period of time. That's one of the reasons that I would have liked to be able to treat this community like we would a brand-new community that we're building out in some other area, and where there's the actual construction of a school. And then, the school, if it needs additional classrooms, well, then, they can apply for trailers and do whatever they want to do. But at the same time, I was just hoping that we would treat this particular area with that same kind of respect that we treat a new development. But evidently we can't for whatever reason. But anyway, that's just a shame. But is there anything else that we can do from an aesthetics perspective to make sure that the school site and the new construction has that quality element that we're looking for? I mean, Mr. Ledesma has said, is there going to be a fence, or is there going to be a tree line or whatever? And is there something that we can do along those terms to ensure that separation and to do some things from a aesthetic perspective that makes this area look very nice? I mean, I don't know what they are. I was thinking of trees and that sort of thing, but I don't know if it should be monuments or whatever. I don't have a clue, but I was just looking for something.
If I may, typically, and I'm not sure if the Rivers neighborhood, it's been a while since I've thought through it. Do they have design guidelines of any type inside the rivers when we granted approval of that development years ago? Were there any, like within Washington neighborhood, I think, or in the South Part, we have design guidelines. In other areas, do we have anything that would apply to them that we know?
No, the only design guideline, well, we really don't have design guidelines, but the plan development overlay zone references the design guidelines would be developed for multifamily residential, and that's all it says. So there are no design guidelines, for basically for the Rivers Phase 2 project for public facilities like this.
I mean, I share the concern. I think although the one thing I'd say is that there's two factors mitigating on this issue. One is the hyperactive homeowners in the rivers in terms of their taste for some trailers just rolling in and plopping down. But also the school, the existing Delta Elementary is these kinds of facilities. I think probably several of us have been there. There's a lot of West Sacramento children at Delta Elementary, and a lot of West Sacramentos that are deeply involved in the management of the school. They have had very high standards. That's the way to get, but the only way to get to the kind of facilities I think you're thinking about really is to start with a track record. I mean, in a big city, a charter school might just start in a storefront, do the best that it can, and apply for this grant or that grant and hope that it can put something together. This one with I remember when Andy Wallace and the folks who wanted to start this first came by. I think we met here in City Hall. How do we get this school started? And they've done really an outstanding job of creating a really terrific school that at least the parents that I hear from in West Sacramento really appreciate and value and see as very high quality. So it's not a legal solution at all to the design guidelines issues, but I do think that the record and the proximity of the existing operation and the intermixing of West Sacramento with its governance and what they've accomplished, even for folks that are in this neighborhood now sending kids to Delta, is something to recommend as well.
I guess where I was really trying to go, and that is let's just take David Stroud's project, for instance. If their proposal was to put in a bunch of trailers at their school site, the council would not go for that. They would have to, the construction of a school is going to be absolutely mandatory in them or the former Richland site or the other site along the Sacramento River. Can't remember the name now. But, we're going to require the construction of those schools, of the actual construction of a school, to fulfill the development agreement or to fulfill the whatever it is that we have in place in the agreements that we have in place between the development community and the city. So, that's some of the stuff that I was really hoping for. But doesn't seem like that's something we can actually do.
I think the school, the neighborhood, the developer, they're all kind of stuck in this catch-22 that they can't. The school district's the only player that could do that, and the school district's determined for a lot of reasons that they don't want to build a school there, and one of them is that they have capacity in other schools in the general part of the city, so it's just not the most strategic investment for them. So it's not in a fit of rage. They just haven't said more, and that they're not interested in doing that anytime soon, over a decade time horizon. So that's just not an option for them for a traditional school to be built. We do have others that are kind of similar in some way. I mean, the West Sacramento Early College Prep Charter School took over an existing district facility, so it looks the same way. But there's the charter school that's at the corner of Merkley and Jefferson. It's in the old bank building, which is actually quite a few acres smaller than this site. There's the Sacramento Valley Charter School that's over on Sellers. That's as its primary target population the Punjabi families, and it's in essentially warehouse style facilities as well. So they make do with what you, and it's a high performing school. It delivers. It's just that you make do with what you can get. So I think in this case there's no other alternative for this site, at least. If you were to decide you wanted to renovate Alice Norman or some other school and create some additional space, that's a different strategy. But for this site, there's really no viable alternative other than something like this. And for me, at least, if you had to do a charter like this, this is at least a good partner with a good track record with some solid West Sacramentans that are leading it. So.
Absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to make sure, did we get clarity on the actual phasing piece of this? Because I am supportive of, just to go back to that subject, that is the important thing here in terms of our ability to manage this phasing so that, again, we don't come back a year from now and have somebody with foundations laid and streets paved, and they said, well, we couldn't make the school pencil or whatever. It sounds, what I think I heard from the folks from the school is that they're going to rely on private financing to get this constructed, so they won't rely on any approval for state money. So they have the capacity from their existing school to sort of allow the expansion of or the build of this school. So it's really incumbent upon that, and they get the go-ahead. I'm not sure, based on what the mayor said, and again, I'm no expert in this field of who approves it, but that's what ultimately we'd like to see, at least I would like to see.
So I have some language that we can consider, if you want to consider,
Sure.
to the recommended action. I hope I captured it. So the recommended action would be that the City Council approve the request to develop Lot 504 in the Rivers Phase 2 project with a 7-acre public charter school and housing on the remaining 5 acres. Housing proposed on the remaining 5 acres shall not commence or be constructed until Phase 1 of the public charter school is constructed.
All right. I actually liked the city attorney's one-up version, which was the first day of school, essentially. Because there's two processes that are happening simultaneously. Can we get the thing built, and can we actually, hire teachers and get them on? Can we actually have a school here? And you could see, okay, we're not going to have a school, but it would pay off for us to. If I were Richland, I'd say I'll pay you to finish the construction if that's the only trigger point, even if a school had already been determined to be infeasible. So to me, that having the trigger be the first day of school or something like that, we don't need to set an enrollment level. If they're that crafty that they say we're going to enroll one student, they'll probably lose their charter. But the notion that a school has opened, I think, is an eminently reasonable condition.
And Mr. Taylor, thanks you for your suggestion on how to finish the school. I agree. And I don't want to get to a level of enrollment.
Okay, I made an error and did not call. I called on all the folks who requested to speak, other than, I'm sorry, Karen, I can't read your last name. Darkenwald, all right.
I am a Rivers owner. I've been there since 2005, so all this 2006 stuff all came way after I was already there and established in the community. So I'm really very concerned about this high-density housing subject. We mostly paid between $700,000 and $1.6 million for these homes, and now we're being told we're going to have high-density housing in our backyard. This is extremely concerning to us as a community. We did not move there with this intention of this being our backyard. So this is very concerning to us. I live on Rolling Green Drive, which backs right up to this new development. We have no easement at all between us and this development, which is extremely concerning. I'd like to see an easement between us and this community. We have a huge tree line right along our back fence, which they want to demolish and put 4 homes along our back fences, which will change our property value, our quality of life, and everything in between. So it's very concerning. I don't mind development. I think that's part of what has to be done, but I want to see it done in a very responsible manner to preserve our community, our quality of life, what we bought into there for in the first place, what we paid for. So I am concerned about this whole development and how it's going to affect our entire quality of life. So I'd like to see, like Mr. Kristoff over there suggested, some very strict controls on how this goes, on the density of how it goes, on where it's allowed to develop behind my backyard, my fence line, and how it's going to impact my entire life, basically. So I just want you to be concerned and understand how we feel, those that were in there between 2005 and before, and how this has changed our entire view of this entire situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so with respect to that issue, so the development for the housing portion of the lot, what that is subject to further
No,
approvals of any kind?
the vesting tentative map has already been approved. And so she lives on, I believe she said Rolling Green Drive. So if you look on exhibit or attachment number 2, you'll see Rolling Green Drive. And if you look to your east, that is zoned for low-density residential. Low-density.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, that's.
It's low-density residential, and the density is 3.8 to 6 units to the acre. And then south of Rolling Green Drive, the density is 6.4 up to 12 units to the acre. So those are slated for single-family development. And then south of that, it's where we have the high density. Density range from 19 up to 38 units to the acre, and this went through the public hearing process, and so these are already entitled for high-density residential.
Did you say 12 units to the acre? Or
Along Lighthouse Drive.
12 units to the acre?
For the high-density, 19 up to 38 units to the acre.
All right, and they're proposing to build at what?
High-density residential.
Right, but at what density are they, the actual, I mean, that's the.
Don't know the
that's
actual
allowance?
density, yeah, don't know the actual density, but that's what they're entitled for the school site. And on this, the school site, that's a density of 12.1 of the 22 units to the acre.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Further discussion? All right. So, I'm sorry, the HOA issue, to accomplish, I don't know if we're talking about a carve-out from the HOA or the HOA design review. There's conflicting issues here, right? The issue is, I mean, the HOA, to me, it's important just conceptually that the school not be a HOA, like, it can't be the clubhouse, but just for kids. I mean, it has to be for the community. At the same time, I know the HOA has concerns about, their ability to sustain themselves financially if everything gets turned into, other uses and what have you, or if they don't have sufficient density, then they either have to charge their existing residents substantially higher dues, or they have to cut back on security and landscaping and other services. So the HOA, I'm just curious, Clifton, Ms. Traylor said that, a carve-out might be accomplished or is automatic unless they opt in, but are we talking about the HOA in total or the design review? And do we have some role to play in that, or is it simply something that the Rivers needs to figure out for itself? Okay. Ms. Andine?
Yeah, and I just wanted some clarity. So the item before us, though, we're only looking at Lot 504 right now. We're not revisiting entitlements that are on the books. We're just looking at 504, at Lot 504 tonight. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Thanks.
Not knowing what the intent of the original development was, I would have assumed that the school site, because it's a non-revenue generating use to the association, was never contemplated being annexed in. And if that needs to be memorialized here, that will not be annexed in, we're more than happy to make that, part of the record or whatever you need to feel comfortable in that regard.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for the neighborhood, overall neighborhood, not the Rivers only,
Yeah.
but the entire
And-
neighborhood, and for the HOA, frankly, for them not to have
Absolutely.
responsibility for maintenance and security and landscaping of a facility for which they can't collect any dues because it's a public
Absolutely.
facility.
And relative to how that works, Phase 2 is all, becomes, the residential component all annexes into the association, which results in a recordation of the CCNRs that does include a detailed design guideline standards for all the architectural and landscape and other community features that establishes the character of the community that was the basis for what's been developed to date. The residential component of parcel 504 is not being debated here tonight. Obviously, we would have to come back before the planning commission, file a formal tentative map, gain approvals, and all of that would need to be reviewed by your planning commission. And I don't know in West Sacramento if that comes to council for ratification or if it stops at the planning commission, but ultimately, a detailed analysis of the screening and all of the materials that would be used to make certain that those are compatible with adjacency of the school would be part of that review, I assume.
Okay. All right, great. Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson?
Yeah, so the issue of the HOA fees, I know, has been an ongoing issue in the Rivers. And I think Groupie has been paying a certain portion of that. And when that stops, there's so many houses standing to pay for the services. So I would imagine they're going to be very engaged with what's in the HOA, what's not in the HOA, to continue to pay for their services. It's been an ongoing issue, I know, in that neighborhood.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, the association is in incredibly healthy, fully funded their reserves, and they've done so by essentially paying double the dues what they would be anticipated to pay at the end of build-out. The target dues rate is $100 per month for Rivers Association members. Members are currently paying $200 a month, and so it's a credit to the community that they have been able to maintain themselves financially with dues that are much higher. So obviously the new development is going to facilitate bringing those dues down and delivering on what the financial model was expected. And we will be as happy as anyone because the 35 levy lots that we own, I think our monthly association payment's $8,700 a month.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, had a pretty rich discussion of this item. Is there anything further? So I guess the motion that might be before us, if someone wants to make it, is that be contingent on essentially the first day of school. We can figure the developer and the city attorney can finalize exactly what the right words are for that it would not be an HOA, and I don't know if there were any other contingencies, I think. All right, so is that a motion, Mr. Ledesma?
Yes, it is a motion with those amendments.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Ledesma and seconded by Ms. Sandine. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you. Item 13 is presentation and discussion on the Mike McGowan Bridge and Village Parkway Extension projects.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Jay Davidson. I'm a supervising civil engineer with the city. I'm here tonight to provide you with a brief presentation on the Mike McGowan Bridge and the Village Parkway Extension project. During construction of the Mike McGowan Bridge and the design of the Village Parkway Extension project. There have been several potential issues and design features that have been identified that staff wanted to bring forward to you, bring it to your attention prior to proceeding with the design and also construction. Are we able to get that on the? Thank you. When the city agreed to reallocate the $9.678 million from the channel deepening project to the Mike McGowan Bridge, it did not include rehabilitation of South River Road from Marina Greens Drive, which is, I guess let's take a look at this vicinity map to get you oriented. Jefferson Boulevard runs there towards the top of the page. You got South River Road near the two stop signs, and just to the right of the Village Parkway extension, and all to the very bottom of the page, which is the Sacramento River. So the Mike McGowan Bridge project does not include the rehabilitation of that section of roadway going from Marina Greens Drive up there towards the top of the page, going down South River Road to the new bridge and the proposed Village Parkway extension. The condition of that pavement along that section of roadway is in very poor condition and is in need of repair prior to the opening of the new Mike McGowan Bridge. The existing roadway in that section, along that section is 20 feet wide, and there is currently enough room for two 10-foot lanes of traffic, but no room for bike lanes at this time. The staff recommends placing an asphalt concrete overlay over that existing road and restriping the roadway for the opening of the new bridge. The cost to perform the work is estimated at approximately $200,000 for what I just described. This estimated cost just includes the section of roadway from Marina Greens Drive down to the bridge. It does not include South River Road to the east of the bridge. Another possible issue at the intersection of South River Road and Marina Greens Drive is that the sight distance at this location is very limited. That's also, right, if you look at the exhibit, at the very top of the page, there's two stop signs on the far left over there, and that's Marina Greens Drive right between those two stop signs. There's a large berm of dirt on the southeast corner of that, at that location that may obstruct a driver's view on Marina Greens Drive when making it difficult for them to see vehicles that are traveling down South River Road. They're heading towards Jefferson Boulevard. Staff is proposing to cut down that berm of dirt as much as possible and adjust a stop sign in that location. Right now it's set back a little. Maybe if we move it up a little bit, cars, once they're up at that stop, will be able to see, hopefully be able to see a little better down South River Road. Staff is seeking some direction on the proposed improvements from council. As part of the Pioneer Bluff transition plan, staff was asked to identify possible issues along South River Road north of the barge canal once the new bridge is opened and to traffic. Staff has identified potential traffic issues near Shell Oil. And what we're looking at here down at in the middle of the page to the right, there's those two rectangles. The far right near that signal is Shell Oil, and then to the left of that on both sides of the road is Buckeye Oil. Currently, there's only one lane of traffic in each direction in this location. When large tanker trucks make left-hand turns into their facilities, they stay in the current travel lane until they can safely make that left-hand turn into their facilities. Once the bridge is opened, the increased traffic will cause traffic to back up in this location and make it difficult for the trucks to make that left-hand turn. Several options are being discussed among staff, including widening the roadway at these locations that are identified up there in those rectangular areas and near Buckeye, and Shell to provide left turn lanes there, installation of stop signs, installation of vehicle-activated warning signs, and/or reducing or enforcing the speed limit in that area. Staff has met with Shell and Buckeye, or has met with Shell and is scheduled to meet with Buckeye at the end of the month. Staff would like to get some kind of feedback from council regarding the options that I just mentioned. Upon completion of the Mike McGowan Bridge, the south end of the bridge will temporarily terminate into a three-way intersection controlled by stop signs. So if you're looking along South River Road and you get up to the Mike McGowan Bridge, which is the black in the very middle, and there's two stop signs on each side, before Village Parkway comes in, there'll be three stop signs there for each leg of that roadway. The intersection will remain this way for approximately 18 months until the Village Parkway extension is constructed. All three incoming legs of this intersection are currently named South River Road. You can see the east side, it's all old South River Road. You got South River Road, the upper to the west, the South River Road, and also going all along the industrial area, South River Road as well. All three incoming legs of this intersection are currently named South River Road and may cause confusion of the traveling public and/or emergency responders. Consideration should be given to renaming one or more of the roadway sections to avoid any confusion. One option would be to rename the section of roadway between Jefferson Boulevard, up there near Marina Greens Drive, and the new bridge, since there is no current businesses or residents that would be affected along that section of roadway. This would be probably one of the easiest solutions. A better long-term condition solution may be to rename the section of roadway from the proposed north roundabout. So we got our north roundabout there just on the other side of the Pioneer Bluff Bridge up to the connection of 5th Street in the Bridge District. However, this change would affect businesses and the long-term process. It'd be a long-term process to complete. The city's general policy and criteria for renaming streets is as follows. The policy provides that a request for a name change to an existing street may be initiated by a majority of the fee title owners fronting the street or by the city council or their own initiative. Specific to this item tonight, staff is seeking direction on whether the city council wants to initiate the street renaming process for South River Road in the Pioneer Bluff and Stone Lock areas. If the city council initiates the process, staff will return on August 20th with various naming options and seek the city council's preferred and secondary naming choices. In accordance with the policy, and the Community Development Department will then consult with affected agencies and departments to obtain their comments to support, objection, or no opinion of the proposed changes. Existing street name changes require a public hearing before the City Council. Once affected agencies are consulted, the Community Development Department will notice all property owners on the subject streets of the proposed changes to be considered by the City Council at least 10 days prior to the public hearing. The Village Parkway Extension project will include two 12-foot vehicle lanes in each direction, 2 roundabouts, 6-foot bike lanes, 5-foot separated sidewalks, 16-foot raised median, streetlights, storm drainage, water, and sewer, and accommodations for the future streetcar. The design team is proposing the use of 2 roundabouts instead of traffic signals for the Village Parkway Extension project, since roundabouts tend to move traffic more efficiently, reduce air emissions, and require less maintenance. The roundabouts were initially planned to be located near the Stonegate Drive and at South River Road. So Stonegate Drive right now, that South River Road is not shown right now, but it would be up near those 2 stop signs, near Stonegate Drive and South River Road, just south of the bridge. Since the developer of the Stone Lock property is proposing a new roadway connection from Marina Greens Drive to the Village Parkway and the uncertainty of South River Road, it was decided to move the north roundabout from South River Road to coincide with the developer's alignment at Marina Greens Drive. And what I've identified there, the dashed line, is the rough alignment of Marina Greens Drive as a future connection. Staff has met with the design engineer and developer of the Stonelock properties, and they liked the idea of using roundabouts and agreed to the current locations. The north roundabout, an extension of Marina Greens Drive, is consistent with the traffic circulation in the Southport Framework Plan. The city will not construct the connections as part of the Village Parkway Extension project, but provide ability to develop, to make connections, the developer to make connections in the future. Village Parkway would connect directly into the new bridge and South River Road connections and would be controlled by stop signs, which that's currently shown there with the 2 stop signs at the bridge, and the roundabout is your controlling factor on that north side for going along South River Road. Staff is seeking direction on the use and location of the roundabouts as proposed. You go ahead and do it. If you'll change it for me, please.
Jay, there's 2 stoplights on South River Road until it gets to 15th Street?
2 stoplights on South River Road, yes, there is. There's going to
Okay.
be one at Clark Pacific and Clark Trucking.
Clark Pacific, and then the other one would be at?
At Clark Trucking. That's just a little bit to the south.
Yeah, aren't those pretty close?
They're a couple hundred feet probably from each other. They're currently out there. They will be activated only when trucks are coming out of those facilities.
Out of those facilities?
Yeah.
And so one of the questions you have for us is, what are we going to do further north as far as Buckeye or Shell?
Correct.
That's the question.
Right.
Okay.
And, yep. I just have a couple more things to share with you, and then I'll open up for questions. Is that okay? This is the existing South River Road looking east. That's the stop bar right at Marina Greens Drive. That kind of shows the condition of the roadway we're looking at, and it's very consistent all along that existing roadway. Next. Here's an aerial view of, there's Marina Greens Drive identified in the yellow, and when you come out heading up the page, heading north, that's the berm of dirt that we're looking at having removed, so that you can have so that there'd be a better sight distance at that location. The alignment shown here is almost a perfectly straight alignment that goes from pretty much point A to point B. However, in meeting with the design engineer and developer for the Stonelock property, they proposed using a S-curve alignment, which is they wanted a slight curved alignment that would tend to help slow down traffic. Well, sorry. However, a slight curved alignment would tend to help slow down traffic and provide a nice visual effect traveling along the parkway. Staff has discussed the alignments internally and has no objections to adding a slight S-curve to the alignment. It's really ever so slight. I mean, if you switch between, I don't have it shown here, but if you switch between the two, it's hard to even tell that there's a curve to it. Village Parkway will initially be striped for an interim condition, and once South River Road north of Barge Canal is widened in the future, then Village Parkway, the roundabouts, and the Mike McGowan Bridge will be striped to the ultimate lane configuration. The interim condition would include striping the ultimate lane, would include all 4 lanes of Village Parkway, only striping one of the 2 lanes in the roundabouts, and striping Village Parkway from the north roundabout to the bridge as 2 lanes to conform to the new bridge. In the ultimate condition, Village Parkway and the Mike McGowan Bridge will be striped for 4 lanes of traffic, and the 2 roundabouts will be striped for 2 lanes. And staff is seeking direction on the preferred alignment here, and discussion about with roundabouts versus signals. And next. And here's the current schedule for the two projects. The Mike McGowan Bridge is going to be opened by December 2014. The Village Parkway Extension Project is currently in design and working on environmental, and is expected to be completed in the spring of 2015. We're going to bid the project in the spring of 2015 and go out to construction in late summer of 2015. And there's going to be about a 1-year construction window where we would wrap it up by July of 2016. And that pretty much concludes the presentation.
Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson?
Yeah, okay, thanks. I mean, it's really hard to even kind of make recommendations when we don't know what the impact of these things are going to have on traffic. You know, I can just visually looking at this, we can assume that, you know, 2 traffic signals right in a row that are triggered by cars coming on and off here, coupled with the fact that we're going to have tanker trucks coming out. I mean, it's going to be a mess here. So, you know, I think at a minimum it would be, are these going to be synchronized? You know, you could potentially do something where you could create windows for the trucks to move out rather than having them trip it, so some other way. But I have no idea without looking at, you know, what the traffic impacts would be. On the South River Road from Marina Drive to, I agree with the roundabouts, but, you know, I guess the question would be, if you're going to start repaving an old part of South River Road, why not do the other section now?
As far as doing the other section now, majority of eventually that section, once the levee project is completely constructed, and that area will be not used for traffic. A majority of the traffic, I think the traffic volumes show that they're going to be coming from Jefferson Boulevard. So that's why we kind of focused on that section of roadway.
No, I mean from Jefferson down to the first roundabout. You know, there's a straight path versus following the existing South River Road.
Yeah, that's part of, like I said, part of the developer's plan to construct that. I mean, it's cheaper to spend a couple $100,000 to rehab the existing until that section of roadway is actually constructed and, I guess, in a sense, needed.
And so what is the time frame between the rehab and when that other road will be constructed?
I do not know that information. I'm sorry.
That's still pretty far off in the future, so it could be used for a while.
It could be, yeah.
Right. I mean, in terms of the renaming of the section from Jefferson to the bridge, I know a lot of people hit that South River Road wrongly. I think Google Maps are probably a little more updated now, but it's always been kind of a problem, that one little section, so I don't really have a lot of heartburn in renaming that. And then the other, I can see it be an issue with businesses that are along there, and if you're going to rename it to Fifth, and you know, you have some transition to deal with.
Right.
But yeah, I think the main concern here is just the flow of trucks and cars through this area. Because you are going to see a lot of people are going to cut off Jefferson here. They're already using 15th to hit South River Road to go up on the freeway at that point. And once this thing's open, you're going to have a lot of people, I think they're going to try there. They're going to turn, you know, during work time, right on whatever the street is, South River Road, over the bridge.
Right.
And if there's 2 lights right after you get on the bridge that are tripped by trucks, you're going to back up all the way over the bridge. It's going to be a mess. So I think some thought has to be put into, you know, during work time when people are commuting, to find some, either work with the companies that are there that, you know, during certain hours, there's going to be a lot of traffic here, or work with the lights. Definitely need to widen that area, because if fuel or tank trucks are queuing to go into the storage tanks, it's going to be a mess, and it's going to be dangerous, because you're going to hopefully have bicycles on a bridge that's plumbed for bicycle, and you're going to have bicycle paths going all the way up South River Road into the bridge district. So I just don't see enough here to, Jeff, just to kind of give general comments, and those are what they are.
Ms. Endine?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I actually want to commend you on this work, because there's so many pieces going on at one time. I mean, we have a transitional area, we have a new bridge, we're trying to be efficient and use our resources wisely to be able to move traffic, but we know that there's new development coming in. I mean, it's a lot of moving pieces, and then having the potential conflict between commuters and then industrial traffic. It's so many things. So to be able to present this big, it's a lot going on here. But I'm feeling pretty confident that you and the team have thought through kind of conflicts, movement, and then also just kept our resources in mind. I think that's also important. I mean, you guys have safety, and then in terms of the naming issue, I think when that comes back, I would be interested in seeing options. I'm for the simplicity, knowing that the businesses are already going through all this transition, and then having to imagine them getting new letterhead or something else while they're dealing with all these traffic issues. I don't know that could be one of those tipping point kinds of things, although I think it could come back to us. So I'm okay with us initiating that kind of discussion. I mean, that would be my direction.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Ledesma?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think Councilmember Sandine has it right. We're juggling a lot of balls here, trying to manage a bunch of things going on. But it's all good because it's a new north-south connection, new north-south bridge, which we need, as you know. And we were fortunate enough to work to get this grant, and we have a bridge under construction. And that's all good. So I'll take these challenges anytime. A couple of quick comments on the temporary or the rehabbing of South River Road as you're being proposed. That's not obviously not ideal, and because it's going to be, you said, just a 20-foot lane, probably very little shoulder.
Correct. There'll be a little bit of dirt shoulder, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing. So I'm concerned about this will become a natural path for bicyclists, and it's the only, minus the current bridge at Jefferson over the canal. While it's being used, I think many people will probably be looking forward to the McGowan Bridge to be able to access. So I'm supportive of rehabbing it and getting it to some shape, because obviously car commuters are going to be using it, but I'm trying to think of any alternative or way to, because where folks are coming in, where the turn is there from Marina Greens, it's also the end of the Clarksburg Branch Trail System.
Right.
So they're immediately going to take that right, and they're going to say, I'm not going to go up Jefferson, and they'd rather go up the other corridor to get up to the Bridge District, to go to Rayleigh Field, or to go to wherever they're going up north. I think that would be a natural tendency. So again, I don't know what that means, but it's certainly, we have to rehab the road first and foremost. It's not in usable shape. But even if there were signage, just share the road or something, to be cautious of bicyclers, because they're going to go there.
Okay.
So that's a concern of mine. The roundabouts, I'm a little torn on this one, because I actually support roundabouts. I worry about the Village Parkway roundabouts, the way it's configured here. And I worry about it because, not that I don't think they're a good device to slowing down traffic. That's not the intent. But the north-south connector and the Village Parkway, in my mind, and this is from years of planning commission and having the Southport framework plan ingrained in my head, it's always been sort of thought of as the alternate method to Jefferson, to getting people north and south. And part of me is thinking that while it will slow down traffic, I think it might, again, without the traffic studies, as Mr. Johannesson says, I don't know what to expect. And I would worry that roundabouts might cause more harm with the amount of traffic we might get from people coming up. Because if going back to what the plan says, the routes were always supposed to be the loop from Southport, the Village Parkway, north-south, as a way for folks coming all the way down to where the new project Liberty would come from, and they'd go up this way and reduce traffic. So again, I'm not sure I've landed and saying, no, I don't want roundabouts, but it is an important corridor to kind of help relieve some of the Jefferson traffic. And we already have 4 lanes planned for the McGowan Bridge. So again, it's just, I'm not sure where I am. I'm sure my colleagues will help me decision that, but that's just my immediate thought.
Okay, the roundabouts themselves it's already been, traffic signals as well as roundabouts have been looked at by our traffic, our consultant for the Village Parkway Extension Project, and they did identify it as a viable option. That was...
As the roundabouts?
The roundabouts, yes,
Yeah.
and it could handle the traffic, what's projected for the, I think the build-out 2035 or whatever it is.
Okay. Okay. I don't have an opinion on the naming part of it, because I'm kind of with Ms. Sandine on the fact that they keep it simple. But I just think about 20 years from now, people are gonna wonder, why didn't we just change it? It will go from 5th Street to South River Road to Village Parkway, all in a matter of 2 miles. And that might seem like if there's a way we could work with the business owners, we might ask their opinion of the same thing. And some of them may not have an opinion. Some of them, if we're going through the transition plan, they may have a different opinion. But again, that's the way I'm viewing that issue. So anyway, it's just a thought. And that's really all I had at this point on those three items.
Mr. Christoph.
Yeah, I concur with Mr. Ledesma in some respects as far as letting the owners do the naming and see if there's some names that they can come up with and take it from there. I think that, number one, have we checked with the fire department on the roundabout? Can they make it with it being 2 lanes?
Yeah, initially when it'll be striped as 1 lane, and we'd have to make sure that it could accommodate.
That's one of the things I'd like to make sure of.
But when it is striped as 1 lane, it'll be very wide and open.
Okay.
Initially.
I don't have any real heartburn over the roundabouts, especially initially. I mean, there's not going to be a tremendous amount of traffic for the first year or so. It'll take some time for people to really understand what's there, how to get onto the freeway, or how to traverse into the Bridge District or whatever else. It'll take a little time. So, I mean, I think that we've got a little time as far as the numbers of people. South River Road, we really do need to give some attention to a bicycling portion on South River Road. And the reason is because, there's a lot of people that I see go down Jefferson Boulevard over the Barge Canal Bridge that are on bikes. And I know that those people are coming from the neighborhoods behind Nugget and all that or even further south. But at the same time, they're going to want to use the new bridge. I think they're going to feel safer. But so I think that they'll really want to use it. So we need to give some attention and some thought to how we are going to best stay within our budgets, but at the same time, we've got some safety issues there for bicyclists. I really don't know how to read South River Road truck traffic, car traffic. I mean, we knew that this was going to be a little bit dicey. And so I'm really not sure how to read all that until I see either accident reports, no accident reports, or whatever it may be. So I'm going to need a little bit of time to really figure and understand the connectivity or the interaction between these trucks coming out and then having cars come across, because I don't want them to back up too, because it seems like you've got two traffic lights that are fairly close to each other that may, and I don't know for sure, but that may back up traffic onto the bridge, because there may be more than one truck that wants to leave these various businesses, and they have to cut across traffic. One area that I do see, I think that really needs some thought and some attention to it, and that is trucks turning left to get into Shell or to get into Buckeye. Because they are going to have to stop to make that turn, and if there's a lot of cars that are coming and heading north, then how are they going to get in? You know, how do they get into their terminal that they need to get into without excessive waiting? Because when you have excessive waiting and you have anticipations, you have all those other things, it's just sort of an accident waiting to happen, if you will. And that's going to really take some thought, I think, and some discussion with Buckeye and Ramus or with Shell or whoever has that. I do think that the berm needs to come down so that there is proper sighting at the other location. And other than that, those are the only comments I can come up with as far as some of the questions that you had asked.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I've got a few. I think that, I mean, there are a lot of balls in the air, and for me, the key is really to focus on the long term and on the user experience, which I think is easy. It's easy to get wrapped up in the immediate transaction. So how is the current person sitting there going to react? As opposed to how are the 10,000 people that are going to be going up and down this street, what's their experience going to be like? And to me, that's really critical. And I don't want to upset Buckeye. I also want to be sure that the 10,000 people that are going both directions all day long are getting what they need out of this facility, because they will go on it. I mean, you know, any opening that gets created, you know, a dirt lane in, people will use it. And folks are looking for every possible alternative to Jefferson and to the on-ramps and everything else. And so I worry a lot about that. And I think the biggest danger for us is to obsess too much around these two transition points. One, the transition of Pioneer Bluffs and trying to essentially freeze in place the conditions that exist for those industrial users while also making it the facility that it's going to be to serve the future. It cannot be both. We can ease the transition, but the transition that we have promised and warned those property owners for 28 years is now happening. Right, so we can make it we can make it easier, but we cannot make it so there's no impact whatsoever. And so that's why I liked Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson's suggestion that we consider something like a no left turn during peak hours. I mean, that's a very common traffic control approach in many places where this kind of a situation exists. So yes, in Buckeye, Shell, you're still able to do your business, but during these periods of the commute hour, no left turns are permitted. So you need to adapt your schedule in the same that we're asking, and you will create backups for folks using the road at other times, and we're going to create backups essentially in your schedule during these times, and that's the compromise in that situation. So I thought that's a good Mr. Johannesson's opening on that one was a good opportunity. The stoplights that we have, the truck activated ones, they scare the hell out of me. Scare the heck out of me. I think people, what we've seen with just the one in front of the apartments on Jefferson. I mean, the amount of rage that gets created when you're like, there just was one, or the ones on Tower Bridge Gateway that last for one car, and then you're there again, and there's another one. They are enraging to users of all kinds, not just motorists, but this is all, I mean, it's true for bicyclists. You cannot get across before the light changes. And so we were told when the apartments one on Jefferson was being, when it was, the one, there wasn't going to be a light, and two, that it was going to just be activated, hardly ever get used. And it's a constant, both real problem, but definitely a perceived problem. So the idea of creating 2 more stop signs on South River Road, in addition to 2 stoplights between 15th and this bridge, that seems insane to me. And it's a recipe for, for a revolt. By those users of all kinds. So to me, a stop sign solution that's ridiculous. I think we can. I'll figure out how to live with all of the pain that we're going to get from those 2 lights. I get why we're doing them, but compounding it any more with any additional control facilities of that scale, I think, doesn't make sense. Similarly, though, the S curve, because the roundabouts will actually speed traffic. Right, all the data shows, especially at intersections like this, where you have one main spine and streets with a lesser amount of traffic coming into them. All the data shows, even in this country, that roundabouts move more cars through faster. So it's not the roundabouts that are the slowing mechanism; it's the S curve. And I want to be careful about that, because I think I understand where Stone Log folks are coming from as a development firm, thinking about how do we get people to slow down and enjoy the development that we're creating. But when we constructed all of Southport, the whole plan for Southport, the whole circulation system, and our decision not to make Jefferson 6 lanes was predicated on Southport Parkway and Village Parkway being not nice alternatives to Jefferson, but being the principal circulation elements for Southport, with Jefferson still being important, but not that Jefferson is everything and that you've got these 2 little auxiliaries. These were to be the primary ways of moving around. They don't do that. To the extent you slow them down and put barriers in them, they don't become that. It makes Jefferson much, much worse. So it's not just that you're frustrated on South River Road, it's that you then move over to Jefferson and compound what's a major traffic problem. So we need to be really careful about preserving that core function of Village Parkway and South River Road. So I would be cautious about the S curve. I'm not like drawing a line in the sand, no S curves ever. All I'm saying is, as we look at South River Road, a key element of that is how does it function as the primary circulation facility for this half of Southport, essentially, going forward. So I think that covers the main elements. On Fifth Street, I am a big advocate of the renaming to Fifth, for a couple of reasons. But really the most fundamental one is the same reason we did the Bridge District, right? Because of the historic separation of the city, this idea that you're leaving one city and going to another where all the street names change and it's a different place, and welcome to the Bridge District, which I forget what it was supposed to be called, Broadway or something. And we said no. It should be Fifth Street because it's an extension of, you're not leaving the city of Broderick or Washington coming into some new special shiny place with diamonds. It's still the same community. And I just think that's a really important, kind of core value that we ought to have. So, I mean, it's, maybe there's a different or a better name, but that's going to be the function of the street, is going to be the spine, the waterfront spine, essentially, linking all Washington and Broderick all the way to Southport. And it should be called, its name should reflect that. So I think there's lots of ways to do that transition where a street can have 2 names at the same time, for some period of time. So you don't have to, have to tell the post office to change your address and whatever. I think there are ways to accommodate that. I'm certainly not interested in causing those businesses any extra trouble. But I think at least our long-term vision ought to be that road it's the same road serving the same city in all of its stretches. And we ought to, to the extent that we can, we ought to try to respect that. I think the other piece of it that it hasn't come up at all is the Broadway Bridge and its implications here. And another reason why, if you get off the Broadway Bridge, turn left, and you hit stop sign, stoplight, bridge, stop sign, then 2 roundabouts. I mean, it's hellish. That changes the game for this facility in a relatively short time frame. So last piece, which is the 200,000 and the transition stuff in between. I know why we're doing it this way, but I guess I want to raise a question about whether it's really the smartest thing, which is because an alternative would be we're not really worried about connecting the bridge to anything until it's connected to the main thing. Right, the point of this bridge is to connect to Village Parkway, right? And because it happens to bisect the old South River Road that isn't even a functional road any longer, we feel like it should connect there while we're building the rest of Village Parkway. So that we said, look, this bridge, we built a bridge and it ends here. But to make that work, we have to spend money now that's essentially a throwaway. But we also start encouraging traffic patterns that I hope you've modeled out. Like what happens if that, you know, if that's the only option and we create a lot of right turn movements off Jefferson onto South River or onto Marina Greens, and I mean there's implications from doing that. Yes, we get an extra year of some people being able to use this facility a little bit.
Right.
But I don't know that it's worth the money or the embedding of traffic patterns that we don't want in the long term. Because really, that's not, in long run, that wasn't ever part of the plan, that this section of South River Road would be maintained. So I'm not saying, for me, it's not a no, but I don't feel like we must have the bridge connect to something on December 2014 or January of 2015. If that something isn't really useful and safe and consistent with, you know, something related to our real plan, because the real goal here is to connect to Village Parkway and to create Village Parkway as that waterfront oriented spine, because and not have people start to use the Mr. Johannessen's old neighborhood as cut through traffic. Right, which is the other challenge with those sorts of issues is, okay, if I live in Newport Estates or other parts of the Northeast Village, that I cut through, through the Stone Gate and try to get to Marina Greens in order to get to this bridge or to come home through that bridge, that essentially makes that neighborhood into an interim Village Parkway. Yeah. That's not fair, right? So I think we ought to be thoughtful about how actual drivers who are hungry for alternatives will react once we do that, and what sort of maybe unanticipated strategies they might have, so that we don't end up in the same situation we ended up when we did the bridge infrastructure. We said the same thing. Nobody's going to use this for a long time, so we don't need to think about it. And the second it was in, essentially, people are like, oh, okay, it'll take me 17 left turns, but I could do this. And then we got train conflicts and a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't anticipate. We can't avoid that here, and I'm sure there's some thought going on at the staff level, but I would just be attentive to that. In addition to the throwaway cost, also what some of the implications for the existing neighborhood that's trapped in the middle, and what impacts it might have on traffic patterns in terms of cut-throughs.
Okay.
So.
Right, if I may, yeah, I think your point on the South River Road interim is a good one, because that's my concern, because I don't think of Fifth Street or the Bridge District as what I think of as Marshall Road when we built out Bridgeway Island, and we cut it off to the residents of Bridgeway Island to force them to move the other way. It never worked, and it just created more problems that we actually thought of. So I think it is the right thought about how we utilize it during the interim period. My first thought is have an access point for public safety perspective is necessary. Something were to happen along Jefferson, and ambulance or something need to go get north to south, we have an access point. But what my thought on it, which is why I brought up the bike lane issue, is it is an immediate connection extension of the Clarksburg Branch Trail. So if we saw it as, and as I think about it even more, the 10-lane, I'm sorry, the 20-foot roadway, 10-foot lanes will be the discouraging point for folks on its own. And I mean, long-term, that could become another bikeway path just to get to the McGowan Bridge. So again, that might be a way we transition it in some way to make it almost pedestrian and bicyclist first, and knowing that it's going to become that in the long term. If there's a way, again, it's just a thought that came to my head as you were saying that.
Yeah, I think it's staff's concern as far as with how bad a condition that road is in as far as safety. I mean, cars and bicyclists.
Agreed.
Yeah, and so I think that's why we're looking at the cheapest fix as far as rehabilitating that road to be able to have it at a safe point when we open the bridge.
Right.
Right, but the challenge is that if you drop your kids off at Stonegate Elementary, or you live at the Riva condominiums, and you're looking at this, and you say, well, if I go down Stonegate, turn on North Beach, and then snake my way through that neighborhood, and then turn to get to this new bridge, it's farther in distance, but I have, essentially, there'll be no competition on that entire stretch of South River Road, as opposed to turning right, going another block and turning right on Jefferson.
No.
I would do it. And that would be a situation for thousands of people. And so for residents that are in that neighborhood, I don't want to see them in a year and a half saying, why did you not anticipate that you would be dumping hundreds of cars in the morning right through my serene, right off my cul-de-sac? That's all. So if you've already modeled that, and we've got good reason to believe that doesn't happen with a model that aggressively accounts for how much people are willing to do to avoid Jefferson, then okay. But I think we need to be very careful about the unintended impacts on that neighborhood in particular.
Okay.
Mr. Johannesson.
Just a quick question. So, one of the things this new bridge is plumbed for is for a potential streetcar extension line.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so in terms of the roundabouts, if it did go down further into that area, would those be taken off, or would it just cut down the middle?
We've discussed that on the design side, and it wouldn't be able to make those turns, so it would go down the middle.
Okay. So you have enough room, you've got a median between the lanes, so would the thought be to have the street one line just go right down the middle, farther south rather than two lines, or is it wide enough for that?
I think it would probably be wide enough for the 2 lanes. It wouldn't go probably right down the middle, but it would go through it. It would go through the median of that roundabout.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Do you have sufficient direction?
I believe so. The notion of no improvements on what is now South River Road near Marina Greens is something that the council would like us to come back on, or was the notion of a closure of that road, that wasn't clear to us. The option of short-term throwaway expense of approximately $200,000, widening it if possible to bikes is one option. Another option is no improvements and access to the bridge.
I don't think we said that. I think what both of us said is we're looking for our own direction back a little bit, that we're thinking about the unintended consequences of opening that up. So I think what I heard the mayor and I would agree with, if you came back and said that we figured out a way to limit right turns from Jefferson going on to South River Road to get onto the bridge, that sort of that sort of planning, so that we understood that we don't create unintended traffic behaviors. That's at least that's what I'm looking for. I'm not saying don't pave it. I'm not saying to pave it. I'm saying that's a concern of ours.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, to me at least, the cost is, at $200,000, the cost is not the main driver. The main driver is the cut-through traffic issue implications. And so it may be that, and if the cut-through, if you can't solve the cut-through problem, then maybe the answer is you just do improvements that are bike only or something like that, so which might be less expensive as well. But if you can make it work, I have no problem with doing it. I just want to be sure that we have as an imperative the protection of that neighborhood from being an interim village parkway for 18 months.
Okay. So that'll be the focus for our August 20th meeting, in addition to some options on some street names.
Ms. Indy, or
And I just want to, as we're looking at this and thinking about that cut through, another unintended consequence could be the cost of traffic calming in that neighborhood, where we have to then, we then have, like, how to figure out how to do one-way barriers, like the downtown grid or midtown grid in Sacramento, and then humps and lights and all those things. So I think that could, this, as we're looking at this now, thinking aloud, I think the $200,000, which seems relatively reasonable, could end up costing neighborhood traffic calming for a year a lot more. So, yeah, I think just trying to figure a little bit more of that out and options would be helpful.
Very good. So we'll have details on both items on August 20th.
Terrific. Just one more comment. I just want to underscore the point you made, because in my opining about the roundabouts. They are more efficient about getting, I knew that. The issue you articulated that I was feeling is, this is the main connector, and I wanted to make sure that the mayor's point on the principle of this parkway, that has to be underscored, because that's what I have in my mind, and I've had in my mind since I started working in public service, that this was to be a main thoroughfare. So a roundabout would make it through. What I was concerned about is what I heard was traffic calming. So I just want to make that point clear, is that we're making decisions about that area, that's going to be an important driver.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all.
Well, for me, I mean, if the bridge is going to be completed in December, people are going to know that it's completed. Somehow or another, some folks are going to have to have some kind of access to get across that bridge. And so, I mean, I realize it won't be ready for full-time, full traffic or whatever, but at the same time, people are going to know that it's going to be open, and I would like to see something going over that bridge. So if it's...
How about some trucks building levees?
Yeah, right. Hopefully we'll have that. But that, I think, is going to be imperative, because, I mean, I think that in some political arenas, they build a bridge to nowhere, or they do something like that, and it's just not the best policy, I think, to do. So I do think we need to, even if it's bicycle traffic or something, we need to have something going across the bridge.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, that brings us then to item 14, which is consideration of an update on the City of West Sacramento drought response. Ms. Benner?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. The purpose of this item is to provide an update on the city's drought response and the recently adopted state emergency drought regulations. So far, the city's outreach efforts and voluntary request for compliance with our Stage 2 urban water management plan, conservation measures, and the 20% reduction in water use has resulted in a 19% reduction in water use so far through the month of July, so we're doing well. However, the city is now required by the State Water Resources Control Board's emergency regulations, which were adopted on July 28th, to move to mandatory compliance with these regulations, and also to enforce the additional conservation measures outlined in that regulation. The full list of the conservation measures is included in the report, but it does include such measures as compliance with the city's odd-even watering schedule and prohibiting the use of potable water or drinking water to wash down your driveway, sidewalk, and streets, things of that nature. In order for the city to make this move to mandatory from voluntary compliance, the city manager must declare a drought emergency. That's scheduled to occur tomorrow. I'd like to note that we had initially tried to, or wanted to send out a letter to all of our customers with the declaration letter included in that information. We have since changed that and decided to do a declaration internally, where the city manager will then direct the director of public works to implement the Stage 2 water shortage contingency plan in our urban water management plan and mandate compliance with all of those associated water conservation measures. Violations of those measures, as well as violations of the updated water conservation code that was approved this evening, will be issued in notices provided to both the property owner and a tenant, if applicable, if it is a rental. We will only issue penalties after a third or subsequent violation. The first two notices will just be notices informing people of the violation, either water waste or those conservation measures in the plan. And we'll be bringing those book of fees to council for your consideration at the August 20th meeting. Initially, it was going to be adopted with the book of fees updates later this year, but we feel that these emergency regulations necessitate review and adoption of that sooner. So we're planning on bringing that to you on the 20th. And one of the most important components of this process, of course, will be outreach to our residents, letting them know of the change from voluntary to mandatory. So we are planning a press release that will go out this week, as well as city highlights. I understand now there's a city lights printing version that's going out in August. We'll to tag onto that as well, and use utility bill inserts, our Facebook page, Twitter, website, and all means that we can possibly use, including even the changeable message signs, so we can just alert folks to what's going on, let them know they can go to our website for more information about the conservation measures and the potential violations and enforcement. And lastly, of course, the city will be leading by example. We've implemented some additional conservation measures, such as some drastic cutbacks on landscape irrigation and irrigation at our facilities, as well as closure of the splash park, and we're reducing our street sweeping frequency. The total reductions for those measures is about over 5 million gallons per month, which has the potential to provide enough water for about 670 residents of West Sacramento. So, as someone mentioned earlier, we are also putting signage throughout the city explaining the need and necessity and reason behind the dry areas and why we're cutting back on our irrigation. That basically concludes my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions about what we're doing with our outreach. I also have some staff here from Parks if there's any questions about their efforts. So I'm happy to take those questions now.
Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Thank you. So just a couple things. I know you all are, and Dina Kirkley has also been involved with this. We're a tree of cities and our city of trees. But you know, one of the things we're seeing is stress. We're seeing trees starting to drop leaves, and so and I know the staff is on making sure that we at least keep the trees alive through this time, and to the way you can do it and conserve water at the same time. You know, one of the, you're talking about outreach communities. One of the things you may do is off Jefferson, you know, some of the places where we've got by the monument, you know, continue to pound this into people that it's now mandatory. And because I think a lot of people are starting to get it, but, you know, they certainly don't get that it's mandatory. And the other thing is on the runoff, and I think if you drive down any of the newer subdivisions at 3 in the morning, you're going to see runoff in every single neighborhood, because the way the sprinklers are next to the sidewalks, the water gets on the sidewalks, and I think it's going to be expensive for everybody to rip up their sprinklers and do it. So when we start looking at enforcement, you know, I don't know what we're going to do about that. Because if you don't water the lawns, I mean, the lawns will die, and I guess that's one avenue. But most of the sprinklers now that are in these tight subdivisions, you're going to get runoff, and it's a technical violation of this. And it's, you know, just not West Sacramento, it's all over the state that's happening. So we're looking at fees and looking at how we're enforcing this. We're going to have to consider, you know, unavoidable runoff, or ways that we can help people, maybe adjusting the sprinkler heads, or rather than, you know, a 180-degree sprinkler head on a corner, you know, trying to help them get a 90-degree or something like that.
Questions or comments?
No, not really. I mean, I think that, you know, as long as we do all that we can to make sure that the mandatory component of this is fully understood, it just seems like it's going to be a little unfair in some respects, because, you know, Southern California, their water reduction's been about, since the governor had talked about it, about 1%. San Francisco's 5%. And here, communities like ours, we're sitting at the 20%, Sacramento and so forth. So, I mean, I realize there are reasons why they're not conserving as much as the rest of the state. I realize that. But at the same time, it just seems a little bit unfair.
Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you. Just a quick comment on, since, I agree with where we, obviously we have to conserve water and the steps being taken, but what I'm wondering is how we might, we're reducing street sweeping as part of this, and if there is, I don't want to say an incident, but certainly somebody, you know, drops dirt on the road or in the front of their driveway, is there a service allowed where we don't want residents going out with a garden hose and trying to take care of that anyway, but I'm just trying to think of ways to, in addition to telling them that you can't use your water for this, can't use your water for that, is there a service we're going to provide to say, if you have a need that you're not sure they can call and maybe get an extra street sweeper that day or something to that degree, because there's not a openly available unpotable water or reusable water unless they're using stormwater storage, which people are now making available. I know we were promoting that, but I'm just trying to think of how to be helpful in that regard for residents about how they might take care of those traditional needs, what they might be able to do.
That's certainly something we can consider to do, yeah. We haven't thought about it that far in advance, but it's definitely something we can consider.
I would urge you to, because I think if we can help provide those solutions, it makes it a little more,
Palatable.
yeah, exactly. So, thank you.
I think it's a really important point. I mean, you didn't say what the volume is of calls that we're getting on our water waster line, only that it's impossible for a human being to digest them all, so they're now going to
I
to
do have that
voicemail.
number if you'd like to know.
I know how many I get, and I don't have a water waste line.
But the line hasn't actually, we just recorded the message today. That will be part of the outreach that we'll be sending out in our press release. Just in July, we had 92 that were reported that required investigation, which meant somebody had to go out and investigate the claim and whether or not it was truly water waste, it was tagged or not tagged. So we've had 403 since January, when the declaration was first made by the governor. And we just anticipate that this move to mandatory is going to.
It's going to make it worse, make it more severe. And so I think that providing actionable, real solutions, as opposed to, I think what a lot of folks hear, oh, there's a severe drought, it's horrible, and therefore your main response should be to go on a vigilante hunt against your neighbors. And not that we don't want the reports, but that's not a substitute for actually engaging in meaningful measures that we all can do ourselves. And so the gotcha stuff is important, but only to a point. And so providing some other alternatives for folks to be able to meet the requirements and to channel their desire to help the community out and the state out, I think is an important thing. Now, will this line also deal with folks who have specific issues with the city? If we have a broken sprinkler somewhere or what have you? Because I do think those calls in some sense ought to have priority.
Right.
Where because they're highly visible, where we're not seen as leading. Even if it's only been going on for 8 minutes, I know I'll get a call and an email or a Twitter thing about it. If there's something going on, and so I do think we ought to be sure that if those sorts of we ought to if we're not checking that line every 10 minutes, which I imagine we're not, if there's a way we can find some way to expedite the review of reports that are directly about the city's inadvertent wasting of water in particular circumstances, I think that would be helpful, because it's important for us to be to lead in the city. So
Perhaps we could include on the message that if it is something related to a city facility, that they call a different number that's actually answered. That could be an option.
Okay. Mayor Johannes?
Sorry, just one quick question. One of the things is this gallons per day use. A lot of communities around the state are looking at that, if ways to set limits. And I know the Bay Area is like 110, something like that. And that's one of the reasons why you don't see the reductions, because they're already reduced. In this area, it's I think 208, something along that line. We don't have water meters throughout the city, so there's really no way to tell who's using what, except if you've got a water meter. But one way we could do is maybe encourage incentives to say by letting people know what their use is, and giving them an average of what is good conservation, what is not, in their water bills. I don't know if we have the capability to do something like that. But if you say like the statewide averages or region-wide averages, 200 gallons per day, we're trying to conserve 20%, so drop that down to 180 or 170. Here's how you do it: you put a brick in your toilet, you take those kind of things, just so it gives people who want to conserve a little more information on how to do it, and to give them a baseline of whether they're doing it or not.
Anything else? Oh, Cindy, it's all right.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think that the situation is so severe, and right now, I really appreciate the outreach thoughts. And I think to all of our points, I'm hopeful that the city, when we have difficult issues, people actually do reach out and help each other. I think we're known for our neighborliness, and if you were at one of the 22 Neighborhood Watch National Night Out gatherings last night, you could see people coming together. So my hope is that when this gets announced tomorrow and subsequent days, and people start to really activate, that instead of thinking the first thing they do is pick up the phone to report their next door neighbor, that they actually go and will actually knock on the door and say, do you need help? I know how to change the timer, or can I help you with as Mayor Pro Tem Johansson said it, the area in which your sprinklers being sprayed. So I'm hopeful that West Sacramentans will step up and help each other get through this, because it is really severe, and it affects us all. So thanks for all your work. I know you've been trying to contemplate setting up a way to, this is like, it's a new mandate that's really kind of out of our control, but we need to tackle. Thank you.
I love that suggestion. I mean, if we had something on our website that was, you could print out, there was a template for that, like, that already said, dear neighbor, I noticed this, and let me know if I can help, or, just something, even if people don't use it, it reinforces that idea about, if you see a problem,
Great idea.
let's, encourage, help somebody to fix it, and not everything has to be a crime.
Right. Sample language could be provided on our website.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
So, great idea. All right, thank you.
Welcome.
That brings us to council calendar. Ms. Richardson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just wanted to point out that at tomorrow's farmers market, Congresswoman Matsui is going to be there between approximately 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. And the district attorney is going to have another neighborhood court information session here at City Hall on the 14th of August, and that's going to be at 5:30.
Any questions on the calendar? City manager reports?
Just briefly, Mayor, members of the council, Oil by Rail, our staff is meeting with at SACOG next week on August 13th to develop a regional response to the EIR for the Valero Benicia project. That's going to be going to the SACOG board later this month. So staff is working on that actively, both the port and our fire department. Those comments to the EIR are required to be submitted by September 15th. Our lobbyist is actively monitoring the water bond legislation, as well as any legislation revisions to the infrastructure finance district law that's in place. Make sure that whatever happens is complementary, and she's right on that. And then finally, many of you have mentioned staff taking a look at the special event permit process. We are doing that now with several departments looking at the process and some recommended changes to come back on our August 20th meeting.
All right, questions for the city manager's report? City attorney report? Staff direction for members of the council? All right, we have no future agenda item requests?
A single
Oh,
one.
you
A single one, yeah. I think other council members have been approached by the Berryessa Snow Mountain region. As you recall, a while back, this council actually supported a resolution for legislation to permanently protect that area. So what's happening now is Congress is not doing a thing, so the supporters are saying, they're requesting President Obama designate the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument for this area. And so the request would be to bring a resolution forward to City Council to that effect.
All right, well, that's a de minimis staff issue, which is our normal filter for, is there any objection to that request? It's consistent with prior council policies as well. So, all right, seeing none. All right, then is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
It's been moved by Ms. Sandine, seconded by Mr. Christoph. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.